keep hitting the wrong button. Hello, everybody. As we finishing up, getting ready. Paste. All right, cool. Nothing happened to my eyebrow. Nothing. I put those are slits in my eyebrow. Nice little markings. Nice markings. Matter of fact, I gotta do something. Pin that right there, cool. As we're getting ready. Oh, it's nice to light an incense. Supreme night, divine night. Blessed be to your night. Blessed be to your day. Nah. There you go. See. I just didn't put my balm on it, so it isn't looking super straight. That's all it is. Those are my slashes though. As everybody's coming in. Spiritual contracts. Cognitive dissonance. The healing process. The importance of shadow work. It took me too long to get all this on. The importance of shadow work. The importance of your healing process. A lot of these different things that we really don't think about. One second. A lot of these different things that we really don't think about. One second. I was watching some videos. Like, I'm very big into creating and turning things. There's no such thing as there's no information that's off limits. The other week, not this Friday, but last Friday, we got into, and the video's on my YouTube channel. YouTube, it's in my link. The link to my YouTube channel is in my bio. But we really got into the aspects of stepping out of that predestination, stepping out of that space of the predestination, understanding that important part of coming into your healing process, and the ultimate aspect of that spirit, you coming into the spirituality, your spiritual presence. And a lot of times that I've looked at ever since before I even knew what the fuck I was doing. Before I even came into my purpose, before I took on being a therapist, before I came on being a spiritual therapist in that space, I didn't understand the importance of making things practical. It doesn't matter what information you get. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you grab, how many crystals you grab, how many sage you burn, how many adornments you put on. If you haven't made them practical in the present state of being, the thing that happens in a lot of the aspects with ourselves is we come into this space. I'm aware. I'm going through my awakening. And I'm happy and I'm excited. I'm going through my awakening. But then it becomes another filler. And it made me think about the aspects of the traumatic experience. We try to do everything on the planet to avoid and not deal with the traumatic experiences. I'm going to cut the cords from this person and I'm going to do this. And we do all of this work. We do all of this work. We do all of this work. All of this work. But I'm going to ask you a question real quick as we allow it to fill up and build in. Are you doing the work as an employee? The employee mindset? That means you're trying to like say, fuck the other handbook. That means I just want a new job. Or are you coming from it from the business or the ownership model? One of the things that I teach my clients, a lot of the things I teach my clients, and I give it to my clients, I teach to my students, I'm giving out that game to aspects is, which space are you in? See, before I came to a certain point, that employee mentality for me, it didn't matter what I did. Because I was still acting as an employee. I didn't accept who my employer was. And when we come into this space and you're thinking about your trauma, childhood trauma from the last relationship that's rooted into the first relationships that you ever seen, trauma from those aspects. Gotta think about it like this. Are you moving based on being employed by your trauma? Are you moving based on being employed by your trauma? That means your trauma is your employer. Your trauma is your grantor. Ask another question. As we're going to get into all this tonight, ask you another question. When it comes to, if I ask you right now, have you written out a will? I want you to think about this. Ask you a question right now. Have you written out your will? Do you know what a will? Do you know what a will act? Do you know what a will is? Do you know what a trust is? Do you know what an estate is? Do you like we go into a lot of these things, especially when I'm always hearing aspects like, yo, we got to go into business for ourselves and all of these things. But all of these aspects are already present. They're already in play. The thing that gets us behind is we don't understand that initial contract, your initial spiritual contract, that was your last will and testament from your last life. Hold that, let it marinate. That was the will and testament. That was your last will and testament from your last life. Your last will and testament from your last life cycle, your last time down here, or if your first time down here. But if I don't know what a will is, I don't know what an estate plan is. This is the big boy stuff when we talk about business. See, it's nice to have the dream of we're all going to come together as a collective. It's a nice dream. It's a nice dream in correspondence. It's a nice dream in correspondence to what we'll call the American dream. One thing that I've come to learn, and it's one of the things that's the biggest part of my everything that I do, is the aspect of making these things practical. Now, yesterday, I was watching my nieces and nephews while I was sitting there watching a couple. I went on YouTube because I'm very deep into the aspects of building out my company, building out my brand, the estate, the trust, and things of that nature. And I was looking at the aspects that he was actually talking about building out a trust. And it was like it's lawsuit prevention. The ultimate aspect is lawsuit prevention. And he was saying some words that really stuck. One thing that he said in particular was, my biggest thing with working with clients, because he's a financial lawyer, he's a financial estate lawyer. He said one of the biggest things that is hard for me working with my clients is having them foreshadow their death. Having them foreshadow their death. Having them foreshadow their death. That means scribing and writing out how their energy, how their money, how their estate, how the houses, the cars, the money, the business, the energy is going to be dispersed in how it's to be accessed. How it's to be accessed by anyone left here in the physical after they leave. And it made me really think about this aspect. And when you're building my biggest thing is that LLC mentality is, what about my first contract? My first contract. How is my first contract established? As above, so below, as within, as without. We love to speak the laws. We love to speak all of the laws, but how are we making it in a practical interface? The aspects of that will and testament, that all a will is, the simplest definition of a will is the directions that you give to the court. They're the directions, they're the instructions to the court to how things are supposed to play out after you transition. In order to avoid what they call the probate period, that probate or the probation period. It's up to about 9 months it's like 9 months. Some goes up to about 2 years of they're waiting for everybody to come in, and you might have a relative over here that knew something about you, or a relative over here knowing about you. And it made me really also think about the aspects of funerals, the homecomings, all the last words and saying the last respects. But we never really look at these things. We're so stuck on we're still stuck on the mantra of it's over, I'm not coming back. All these terms that I always saw, after I started looking, I'm like, these are terms based on escape. I'm so concentrated a lot of times because we come to that space. Earth is ghetto. Earth is ghetto. Tired of humans. I ain't even from here. But what are you doing while you here? Ask yourself the question. What are you doing while you here? What are you doing? You came down here with some orders. You came down here under your last will and testament to how your shit's supposed to work. If you came in under a heavy, like, now when we think about the aspects of your trauma, your trauma, whether it's the intergenerational trauma, that intergenerational trauma, you came in under that trauma. I want you to think about that aspect. That developed a trust. No, I'm not. Study all, follow none. Study all, follow none. You developed the trust. You're wondering why a lot of things, you're thinking about this. Generational curses. What's at the root of the generational curse? Things of this nature, we say the words, we say a couple of words about it. We say, we're breaking generational curses, and I'm going to be the first one in my family. And let me give you something to think about. What if you being the first person in your family to do something is no more... Oh, you mean the 5 points of my energy? You mean earth, wind? You mean earth, fire, water, wind, ether, or the soul? The ether? The protection of energy? That's what that is? Yeah, that's what the pentagram stands for. But coming into that aspect, if I ask you another question, do you know what an irrevocable trust is? Do you know what an irrevocable trust is? Do you know what a domestic trust is? A revocable trust. An offshore trust. See, these terms are terms of business. And everything down here runs based on you got some business. See, the employee mentality that we're going to break down tonight, that employee mentality, that's the mentality of that's being employed by that traumatic experience. So you're trying to, I'm gonna break the generational curse. I'm gonna break the generational curse. You'll wonder why in the spiritual aspects you catching all types of slack. You wondering in your physical world, as above, so below. So in the physical world, you catching all types of slack because you're challenging an irrevocable trust. The irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust, I'm gonna do a triangle like this. It's a triangle. Irrevocable trust is created by the grantor. And in this case, there's a grantor, the one that establishes the trust. There's the trustee or the trustees or the executives of that trust. And then there's the beneficiaries. There's the beneficiaries of that trust. From that first traumatic experience, let's go into intergenerational trauma. Let's go into the generational trauma. That time when your grandmother decided to stay with your grandfather, even though he beat her black and blue, and because of her events in her life where she never met her father, she didn't have her father in her life, and the last thing that she wanted to do was break up a family. All she wanted was a family. She established that trust. They established a trust, a bond. They established a contract that coincided with their contract. They were the grantors of an original contract. I want you to think about that. The grantors of that original contract. And everything that they said, the lines inside of that contract, the emotions that they went through, the businesses, everything that they created in an aspect. Then they created the trustees. And then they made beneficiaries. That's your mother, your father. They were the beneficiaries. So they benefited from that trauma. One of the biggest things that I tell my clients is the first thing that we have to admit to ourselves. I tell this to everybody. First thing you got to admit to yourself when it comes to any traumatic experience. First, use the aspect. Any traumatic experience that you've ever been through, at a certain point in time, it's not on you that it happened, but what you do with it. If you're not changing it, you're ultimately accepting it. So think about the traumatic experience. I had a hard childhood growing up. This happened to me when I was little. This list of things happened to me when I was little. So you made a choice and said, okay, cool. I'm going to use that, and that's going to establish my trust. My emotional debt, the karmic debt, my karmic debt that I put into that trust. What are the beneficiaries? So I made an irrevocable trust. Because nobody in the family want to talk about it. It seemed too hard, or nobody want to go. I made an irrevocable trust. The only way to break an irrevocable trust, which leads to my next point. The only way to break an irrevocable trust, all parties must end. All parties must die. They must transition and move on. The only way that you can break an irrevocable trust is if the parties must die, then it's a whole process that has to be rewritten out. So when you're thinking about your soul contract, that contract you wrote to come down here, and now you're the one that's breaking those curses. In order for you to even tap into that energy, and this was the important part, because there's no more of this skipping steps. Ooh, I'm this spiritual person, and I'm on this level, and I'm here, and here. I know where I'm at spiritually, but I've sat down with clients, and I take them into that first meditation. I take them into that first regression, and the first time that they see their higher self, that higher self is skin and bones and just sitting up there all decrepit because they ain't been fed in years. The ancestral pool all dried up. No one's consecrated anything inside of that space. Feel what I'm saying? Because you want to skip the steps. As above, so below. You can't skip the steps. But the key is to, as I said, we're going to get into this, is bringing this into a practical space. Creating your first revocable trust. The revocable trust is your healing process. So the irrevocable trust is when you're sitting there and you're assessing and you're writing out your will. You wrote out that will and testament, the things that you had to come down here and knock out. You wrote it out energetically. The grantor was the trauma that you came through, the traumas that you experienced, or those energetic points that you created, that you experienced, which named you the trustee. But it also named you as the benefit. It also named you as the beneficiary. So higher self is the trustee, lower self is the beneficiary. So then we get deeper into that aspect. We get into that psychological aspect. Last week we talked about trauma bonding. We talking about trauma bond. We talking about codependency. So now you have somebody, you want someone to manage. Think about this. You want somebody to manage your emotions. You want somebody to accept you. You want somebody to take you as you are. Think about all the things that you said. I don't get in relationships because I love too hard. All of these exploitive narratives all of these exploitive lines that you created in order for you to live out inside of that trust. Live out that contract. So of course, every time that you challenge it, it's being challenged by the courts. The court will be think about this. It's the court and it's a jury. It's a court of your peers. Who are those peers? This when we get into the aspects of this when we get into the aspects. This when we get into the aspects of thinking about your ancestors. I love my ancestors and all my ancestors, and I love my ancestors and I love my ancestors. Okay. The court of your peers. You wondering why? You wondering why you can't seem to get past a certain level. Because there's that lower level. The lower self is the aspects of the employee. One of my favorite mantras that I used as a program earlier on in my work was, my ego is a horrible boss, excellent employee. Your ego is a horrible boss and an excellent employee. When you're sitting there in that irrevocable trust, you aren't even the beneficiary. Your ego plays trustee. The identities based on that you created based on your trauma are the beneficiaries. What are the beneficiaries? Let's use this example, the triangle. The grantor. Say the grantor. The traumatic experience that happened when you were 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. That's because we don't get, if you're not familiar with me, Papa Samdi, we get deep in it. We do shadow work and we smack shit up over it. Let's say when you were 5 or 6 years old, you experienced a traumatic event, whether it was you were touched when you were a child, or the fight between your parents, or you didn't have your mother in your life or your parents in your life, they fought and all these things. That become the grantor of that trust. That's the grantor. At that point in time, your ego became the trustee. Your ego was meant to protect you. So it became the trustee. It became the executive of that trauma. It became the executive of that trauma. It means they hold the control of the trauma. Your ego has the control of the trauma. From the aspects of it being the executive of that trauma, it named the beneficiaries. What are the beneficiaries? Hyperadolescence. What's hyperadolescence? Hyperadolescence is a state of, from that traumatic event when you were 5, 6, 7 years old, whatever age that it happened, and since that was never resolved, you created a hyper state of trying to get past that. So basically, when you became a grown or an adult, you never fully developed the inner child relationship. You never fully disciplined the inner adolescent. That's you acknowledging and bringing it to the surface. That's you acknowledging and bringing it to the surface. We don't get into that. Hold that. So getting into that space. So now you created a beneficiary. You got created a beneficiary to that. Created a beneficiary. Hypersexualized. Codependency wound. Codependency. Your emotional wounds became the beneficiaries, i.e. your shadows, i.e. these other aspects that broke off of your shadow. And as long as that trauma is in play, those beneficiaries always benefit. I just want somebody to love me because I love hard. So you just keep repeating to yourself these mantras that are the statements of your will and testament to how everything is supposed to go inside of your life. So now you got your beneficiaries. But it's a irrevocable living trust. Irrevocable living trust. Irrevocable living trust. The point of an irrevocable living trust in the traditional manner, in the traditional sense, before we bring it into this aspect and break it down and use it into use this in the contrast of understanding the spiritual contract, is to when you leave, is to skip the process. You have to intentionally choose. When it comes to the aspects of your state of your living, you have to intentionally choose. 3 of my favorite lines, if you're not familiar with my favorite lines: healing is a destructive process. You are deserving, but you are not entitled. And the level of honesty in its truest tense is the comprehension of transparency and the need for your vulnerability. You cannot plant anything in hard soil. You can't plant nothing new. You can't uproot roots. You can't do anything unless you're sitting inside of that vulnerability. So yes, in that aspect, you got to live in that state of that intention. But when you're creating that, when we talk about that contract that you created, that emotional contract that you created, your childhood that you created, up until I'm gonna give you some wild numbers when I was studying trust. The first time revocable trust, I'm gonna give you this timeline to give you some game. The first time that the revocable trust was created was in the 1980s. Before that, every trust was irrevocable. That means you came in, you lived, and you died. You came in, lived, died, repeated. So when you think about the aspects in that spiritual sense of you keep reincarnating down here, or you want to keep thinking about the aspects that's going to that, let's go over here a little bit. You go into the aspects of, oh my God, the United States is a business, it's a corporation, and they own us, and da-da-da-da-da. And we got to get ourselves right. Can't look at it as an employee. You're going to use that, that's going to be, okay, cool, that's the new beneficiary. Because as long as it's playing out, whatever has your attention powers your intentions. Whatever has your attention powers your intentions. Think about that. That means if only time I set intentions is usually, because think about it, let's be honest, we got to be honest. You setting your intentions, you usually set your intentions similar to when you pray, when you want to meditate, or when you want to do certain things. You usually do it only after times when there's a great grief or guilt or you've been triggered. After a great event of that nature. And even if you do get into that space where you're trying to be more disciplined with yourself, your discipline's not as strong as it could be. There's a reason for that. I love mantras and I create mantras all day. Another one of my mantras that I had to get honest with. It takes more discipline. It takes true discipline, and it takes a great deal and more discipline with great power comes responsibility. It takes a lot more discipline to do what you desire versus doing what you can. It takes a lot more discipline to do what you desire than to do what you can. See, doing what you can, all you gotta do is wake up. Doing what you can, all you gotta do is wake up. Hope that they gave you some hours at the job. Hope that your baby father's gonna pick up the kids. Hope that your baby mother ain't gonna trip. Hope that your mom gonna do this. Hope that this gonna happen. You stuck in that perpetual hope. And that hope had you stuck in a predestination. So you never take the time. So anytime that you do come into the business state of things, I got to take care of business. You take care of business as an employee. You foreshadow through your trauma. You foreshadow your life. You foreshadowed your life. You wrote out your life through your trauma. You wrote out your life. You literally foreshadowed and you created points for you to project and live through your shadow. To live in your darkness, to live in your pain. To live in your pain, to live in your despair until you find something to make you happy. But let's think about it from the business sense. As an employee, the funny thing about that video, my man said, even an employee must think business. Even an employee must think in a business mindset. Even a W-2 employee or an entrepreneur, when you take on anything outside of yourself, that is you making a contract, or that's that LLC. You are now creating a partnership. Whether it's a limited partnership, that means it was with your baby father, baby mother. Limited partnership. Whether it was a true partner, whether it was a partner, whether it was a sole proprietorship, that means that something happened and then you was on your own most of your life. In any given sense, you created some type of company. The children that you created, those are your companies. Anything that you create in the physical form that you now have responsibility over, it's a company. So we got to think about it as business. So whenever your emotions get triggered, is letting you know when your emotions get triggered, is letting you know where you're not present. That's all. Whenever you get triggered, that's letting you know where you have not been present. That's where you are still an employee. Wherever you get mad at the next relationship that you got into, or the last relationship, and all them shits that made you angry inside that space, all that was letting you know is that's where you still were employed. You were still an employee that came at a certain rate of pay, but in your mind, think about it like this. Business or job? Is your life a business or a job? You can hate your job all day. But simplifying what hate is, what is hate? The lack of understanding. The lack of understanding. The lack of understanding. So you hate your job because you don't know, you hate your job because you don't understand what it actually is. What your job is actually meant for. See, the employee aspect. The trigger is the only way to allow yourself to rise. You have to be able to assess it first. When it comes to the aspects of a trigger, whenever you are triggered and is letting you know where you are emotionally not present, sitting in that space, and people will be like, well, what if I got hit in the face? We're not saying when you got hit in the face. If you get triggered, that means something makes you mad, pisses you off, makes you sad, makes you upset, makes you triggered. What comes to the surface is the echo of the true emotion. Is the echo of the true emotion. You don't want to feel, you hate being disrespected. You hate being disrespected. But in reality, you hate feeling hurt. But until you sit But until you sit with those emotions, you don't get to the root of what originally hurt you. You can't take the assessment. You can't take the audit. See, the healing process is auditing all of these terms that you've made practical. All of the terms that you've made, all of the agreements that you've made based upon your trauma that you've made practical, everyday language. Literally speaking spells over yourself. As was said earlier, you're speaking a spell over yourself. So as long as that's playing out and you're wondering, why my life keep going this way? Why my life keep going this way? Why my life keep going down the drain? Why my life keep happening like this, this, and this? Go read the contract. Go read the contract that you wrote out. You wrote a contract out when you were 5 years old, when you first got pushed down and bullied in school. They say you got bullied in class. You wrote out a contract that I'm never going to get bullied and picked on again. And in your ego, being a horrible boss, went and picked up all the information, all the pamphlets, all the information, all the knowledge to help you. So now you ain't never going to get picked on again. So now you gravitated to, you didn't learn all this self-defense. You didn't got a gun. You didn't learn how to use knives. You didn't learn how to, now you didn't came into your spiritual, now you came into the spiritual realm. That's the key. That's the key. The logical aspect is being able to acknowledge the trigger. The non-logical aspect, I did the video we did not last Friday, but last Friday. We'll say last Friday. It's on my channel. We came into the aspects of, once I acknowledge that trigger, the thing that stops us a lot of times with stepping out of a trigger or not working through the trigger, working through the emotional impulse, the thing that stops us is that we put limitations on it. You put limitations on it. My mom did this to me. I got to take away the title. I got to take away the title of mother. I got to take away the title of mother. Mom's got to become her, who she was. I have to see my mom as the woman that she was in order to understand how she came into that title. How she came into that title. Because until I do that, I'm going to use it as, this is how I'm going to use it. I'm going to use that as my buffer that buffer or that guard or that barrier for me to sit and actually come into the aspects of change. See, the hardest thing to do is to forgive your mother. The hardest thing for you to do is forgive somebody that you know. But when it comes to people that you don't know, what do? In a relationship, most 9 times out of 10, when you send this out of a relationship, you apologize every 15 seconds. That's your trauma response. You respond every 15 seconds, but I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm sorry. It's easy to apologize to somebody that does not have the same title. They're trying to figure it out too. So when you remove that title, now, and this is a major key whenever I'm working with my clients when I'm working with my clients in sessions, and we get to that point where we're removing those titles, now you get to see this person as, I don't know who, I'll use my mother as I didn't know who Dorothy was. I didn't know who Dorothy was. I didn't know Dorothy's childhood. I didn't know what she'd been through. I kept trying to attach everything to her, to the mom. My mom. My mom didn't meet this person. My mom had this type of life. My mom had this type of life. So I couldn't see it as Dorothy had this type of life. So by natural cadence, when you're trying to make things better, like I use the example right here. When we talk about altar work, The first thing a lot of times what we want to do with altar work, we want to go get the adornment. We want to go get a skull. We want to go get we want to go get the cards. We want to get all these things. But this was my first altar work. This is a picture of my mother. This is Dorothy. I had to get to know her. I had to get to know her. The more that I got to know myself, the more I got to know her. I could no longer put on her the aspects. I no longer could put on her these things because I wanted her to, because I had this twisted definition of what a mother was. A mother's supposed to protect and nurture us, help us grow, and all these things. So every time something happened to me, I would try to put it on that title. It's your fault that this happened to me, and it's your fault that I'm doing this, and it's your fault that I'm doing this, and it's your fault that I'm doing this, and it's your fault that I'm doing this. That's the process. That's the initial process. Because your mother, you gotta think about it like this: the title of mom, the title of the parent is a beneficiary clause. The title of the parent is a beneficiary clause. The grantor of your mother, your mom's original trauma, your parents' original what happened to them, was the grantor of their own irrevocable trust, and they became the trustee. So my mother, Dorothy, she became the trustee, and the beneficiary was the aspects of being wife, mother, daughter, sister, and it remaining inside of that triangle aspect. It's more business. Favorite line. If you never seen New Jack City, it's business. It's never personal. It's business. It's the business of your emotions. If I ask you a question, like give an example. If I ask you what is financial intelligence and literacy a byproduct of? Could you answer that question? I remember I didn't know what the hell that meant. So I remember I asked myself, I don't know what the fuck that is. But my emotional intelligence, my emotional literacy is the byproduct of my emotional intelligence and literacy is financial intelligence, energetics, economy. So when I got deep into the aspects of abandonment wounds, trust wounds, my new beneficiaries, my abandonment, my rejections, my fear of not being good enough, my fear of my pain of being an accident, or maybe it shouldn't have happened, or maybe it was my fault. It was my fault that this happened. Everything that I did opened up those accounts, and those became my managers. So when we're stuck in that employee state, those became my managers. So it didn't matter what job I had. And here's the thing. Here's the game. How it started, we've heard the line, how it starts and how it must continue or it will end. So think about you getting into your first job ever. Getting your first job, your first place, your first girlfriend, your first relationship. That first trauma bond, that first fresh out the box trauma bond, that first cell phone. I'm an 80s baby. I remember when our cell phones was the charger port was bigger than the cell phones. Yes. How would the old folks say it? So think about that aspect. Even in the aspects when you think about you develop the hustle mentality. All of these codes and all of these lines that you've written out, you just kept rewriting your trauma. My first cell phone was the Sprint A400. It had the little Samsung on the front. Bitch was gray and green. Shit. I'm still mad. I still have some reserves about Sprint PCS and that jump, but that's neither here nor there. But going into that space with yourself and you start thinking about these things, and we start breaking these things down. We start really breaking these things down and looking at these things and understanding these aspects. And looking at these aspects. 1 second as I do some other buttons. Start really breaking these things down and looking at these things and understanding these aspects. And looking at these aspects. 1 second as I do some other buttons. As you come into the aspects, you press like think about these aspects. So think about your whole entire life. You built a whole entire life out of your trauma. The hardest aspect in dealing with our trauma is not so much facing the trauma. The first thing, as I said, the first thing always is I got to accept how I benefited from this. I benefited from this trauma. I benefited from the trauma. Benefited from it. Benefited from the trauma. Second thing I got to understand is in order for me no longer I must accept, I must acknowledge, become aware, become conscious of how I benefited from my trauma. And my realest, the deepest down, most honest thing that I really got to sit with myself is I have a fear of I don't know who I am, i.e., I fear no longer existing. If I face this, everything changes. If I face this with myself, everything changes. I'm no longer going to be able to use my trauma as the grantor of my trust. I no longer can use the development of the aspect. Think about the word trust in itself, trust in a business sense. First thing you think about trust is 9 times out of 10, when we think about trust, we think about it based on proximity. What's up? You think about your trust, you think about trust in proximity. You'll think about trust in proximity. Trust to be based on proximity. If you can see them, if you can touch them, think about because you activating. You've been doing spell work there. You've been doing this spiritual. You're a spiritual being. You've been doing it the entire time. You didn't come into it. You just got to realize where you've been doing it and go reassess it. Your trust is based on seeing that person, feeling that person, hearing that person, touching that person, speaking to that person, activating all them senses, putting your fractured soul into the space, that application in. If I put my application in for this relationship and they love me, then I'm good. Then I proved I'm a good person. I'm a good person. My skill set works. But if I develop my skill set out of, I've talked about, I go into this all the time. If I develop my skill set based on trauma, that means the only thing that's going to benefit from my skill set is that wound. It's going to aid that wound. I'll go through my entire life. And at the end of it, when I'm about to transition, when I'm about to leave, I didn't even sit down and write out the will. I didn't know what a will was. So let's talk about that will. All a will is, the last will and testament of Carlos states what? What does my last will and testament say? See, if I just go through the normal cycles, my trauma, and then recycle myself back down here, and I come back, hey, I'm back in the trauma. I'm back, yay. We think about as above, you get stuck in purgatory. As above, you get stuck in purgatory. As below, the probation period, or the probate period. This is when it comes to aspects of establishing the trust after you transition, after you died, There is a 9-month minimum process where everybody can come. Everybody can come. Relatives. Think about your relatives talking about he was a good person and he died so young and all of these aspects. They can say all of these things, and all of that is now written, subwritten in your new contract. All of that gets written up. All of that gets into the new contract. All of that's in the new contract. You sitting in purgatory waiting for which way you got to go, and you didn't write out the will and testament to the instructions of how to work with your energy. So now you cycle back down. Whole new contract. Couple little dump-ins. Now you got to live that life all over again. See, the biggest thing that I teach my students and my clients is you got to let go of this thought process of I'm not coming back. I'm trying not to come back here. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna get it right. You got to get rid of that thought process. Your whole thought process, the last thing on your mind should be that. The first thing on your mind should really honestly be, you should be doing your work like you coming back as one of your grandchildren. You should do your work as you coming back as one of your nieces or your nephews. You should be doing your work. You should be doing your work and your due diligence with your work like you coming back as one of your nieces and your nephews. You should be doing your work as you're coming back. When you're coming back, if you cycle back down, you got some things you got to take care of. Maybe you had to clear some things out. And now you coming back to teach that whenever you pop up, whenever you get to 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, when you old enough to look on the YouTube channels, you want to be able to, this is just using an example. I use myself as that example. If I'm cycle back down, I can't wait to come back and listen to the videos that I've put out. I cannot wait to get this information. I can't wait to come back and get this information if I come back. See, that's the shifting. That's the ownership. That's the business mentality. See, the business mentality is the owner of nothing and the controller of everything. Your spiritual wealth is going to matriculate down into the physical wealth. It's not so much about what you're trying to acquire. Like, think about, I love how you asked that question. And the aspects, the first thing we'll think about, like, yo, I got to make sure my kids, and they got to do this, this, and this. Think about it like, I want you to really think about this real quick. If you acquired $18 million, if you acquired $18 million, and that is in your estate, you got $18 million. You acquire $18 million. And your only living heir, when you transition, let's say your only living heir is 8 years old. Would you really want to leave $18 million to an 8-year-old without any instructions? Would you really want to leave $18 million to an 8-year-old without the instructions? Without any instructions? He ain't got no instructions. He or she ain't got no instructions. There's no safeguards in place to help keep them with the energy. What do you think everything when you're studying about the ancestors and the spirits is? You want to write veves and write sigils. What do you think those are? Those are the aspects of the directions. That's the instructions on how to use the energy. And it's always exact. See, the employee mindset, think about that. When we think about that employee mindset, an employee think money to do this, energy to do this, my body's to do this, my body, my choice. We get stuck in what we project as what we call societal norms. But we totally forget, I'm going to say this before it fades out. We think about, but society says this. Society is only based on a collective of individuals. We totally forget that. We totally either forget or don't want to accept that. We want to say, oh my God, the stuff they're putting on TV is this, this, and this. but it's a collective of the aspect of what we project into the space energetically. Remember, the shit's energetic first. It's energetic. You can get mad about every Epstein, every pedophile that you've ever seen. But the only reason that you're seeing them is because that one uncle that nobody wanted to talk about, he was sick, is now that ancestor or the executive of that trauma, and you are benefiting, your whole family's benefiting off of it. That's the conversation to have. They're benefiting off of it. Everybody benefiting off of it. Everybody sitting there benefiting off that. Energetically, they're benefiting off of it. Okay, he was sick because of this, and this. Okay, cool. So we can use that as an example. And now I want to experience these different forms of sickness. So now you left the directions. No directions. That energy is now here. No directions. There's no will. There's no petition. There's nothing written out. There's no pour over. When it comes to aspects, when you write out your will, you write out your original will, you foreshadow it as far as you can, as detailed as you can. You establish your trust in your estate. And then there's another form. Some lawyers, it's like 11 different forms. One of the forms is actually called self-reflection. One of the forms in that stack, I got my paperwork and it's coming in the mail. See, that's the fun part. That's the fun part. So as you do your changes, the first things that you will start to see, first things that we're going to see is your view, the perception, your perspective is changing. You have submitted to the perception based on your trauma to sit inside of that seat of that perspective. See, my perspective, that's an internal aspect. My perception, that's context on emotions. How if I start doing this and I start acknowledging these things, then my mom gonna feel some type of way about me. My mom gonna do this for me. And that's the key. That loneliness, you have to become comfortable with that loneliness. And at a point in time, you have to build something. See, the thing about the aspects when we get stuck in that trauma, we like when we start doing the work and we start feeling the despair, the anger, we start feeling all the emotions keep coming up. We're feeling what's really happening is you're feeling the emotions for the first time ever for real. Because before this moment in experience, you lined up every one of your traumas, every experience that you had after the traumatic effects. You lined them all up in that synopsis, that neuro-linguistic program in your subconscious, that suggestion box in the back of your head, and you're literally grieving. You actually start to grieve because you link them all to that. If every time you have an event inside of your life that you go and you find yourself going back and you're not staying present, remember, that's where you're still employed. That's where you still have work to do. Remember, it takes 21 days to break a habit. 21 days. 21 whole full cycles. It takes 90 days to create a new behavior. It takes 180 days for that to become a pattern in the new state of self, that new action of self. And you've been doing that. You've been doing that unconsciously ever since the beginning when you were born. So it's not going to be one and done. That's why I was telling people, like, it's not going to be so that lonely aspect or that true detachment, exactly, that's what it is. That true detachment, you're now moving from the state of being lonely is disassociating. The state of being lonely is disassociating. The state of sitting with myself, being vulnerable and understand that I'm not alone, I'm okay with being to myself, centered with myself, integrated with myself. We're going to get into that when we talk about marrying yourself. The integration with self, that's that state of detachment. That means I can take full, because of the absolute, I can take full acceptance of whatever's happened. I can take full acceptance of that person over there, mother, father, sister, brother, cousin, whoever. I can take full acceptance. But I fully understand that just because I accept it does not mean I have to partake of it. See, this is where that discipline comes in. This is the difference between you stepping into a room full of women or stepping in front of a room. It's like you stepping into a room full of women or a room full of men or a room full of, you want to say, high value power players, and your mind doesn't go down, it stays present. Because if you step into a space, you say, man, I can't be around a bunch of women, man, all them beautiful women in there. Why can't you? That means you got some, that means that urge and that means you still got some stuff you got to work on. That's the only reason you were accepted into that space. And this is another key in the aspects of that promotion. You want to move forward and shit. Remember, your trauma has you in a hyper state. That hypervigilance, hyperadolescence, hypersexualized, this hyper state of energy. You in a hyper state. You constantly closing in on yourself. So since you're in this hyper state, you have no point. Mm-hmm. Funny story about smoking. I remember when I started. I remember when I was smoking and I stopped smoking. I stopped smoking because everybody, the same conversations I would have when I didn't smoke is the conversations I had when I did smoke. So then it came to a point of me, my special blends of herbs. It's the acknowledgement of that space. Okay, cool. I don't need this anymore. What I used to use this for, I don't use it anymore. But now I got to ask myself another honest question. I don't smoke anymore. Why did I smoke in the first place? Okay, cool. Since I'm not smoking anymore, what other escapes did I create or vices that I create that are that carry the same energetic frequency or tone of me smoking, of me drinking, of me jumping into relationship after relationship? What else did I use to replace that? See, the employee mentality is always based on replacement. Do just enough work to level up. Do just enough work to get that promotion at the job. Do just enough. If once I hit the ceiling, then I got to go do something else. But as I'm coming up into that ceiling, think about the employee mentality. You get that raise, you like, ooh, I'm about to go get a charger. I'm about to go get the new car. I got a raise. But at no point in time, your emotional intelligence, being on fear, being need to be seen, that rejection is what you're feeding. You're still feeding that same benefit. So you never raise your emotional awareness, or i.e. your budget. You never raise your emotional budget. It keeps you down. So then you're like, everything keeps me down. Everything keeping me down. You're the only one keeping you down. I don't know how many people hit me in my inbox and they'll be like, I think someone put something on me, and I'm reading the text message, or I allow them, we have a video conference call and I'm reading their energy. I said, there's nothing on you. Your soul is in the people that you talking about putting stuff on you. That's where your soul that's where your fragmentations of your soul points are at. That's what you don't know what the real feeling is. You're only used to context. You used to keeping things in a certain context. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. You'll know when there's time to level up because you first got to be honest about it. you'll know when it's time to level up. You'll be damn near pushed out of that space. This is where we get stuck in that process. This is another part of that process. This is something that I'm breaking people out of, I broke myself out of, and I'm still breaking myself out of. Every time you level up, bad shit happens. That's another survival narrative. That's another employee narrative. Every time you about to level up, something bad got to happen first. So now you looking for the bad stuff to happen. Meanwhile, on the other side, you had all these opportunities come up, but since you're waiting for something bad to happen, every time you go into a space, whether it's no matter what type of relationship it is, that also removing the limitation. Remember, removing the limitation of using things as the relationship. Anything that I interact with is a relationship. Mm-hmm. Anything that I am interacting with is a relationship. Therefore, every relationship that I have is going to be intimate. That means everything I interact with is a relationship and it's intimate. That means that it is sacred. That means it's always a sacred energy exchange. I've said this before. If you go to my channel, most of my lectures, lives, and classes we do, my favorite thing to say is like right now, we's having a sacred energy exchange. Right now, we having a sacred energy exchange. When you take yourself out of the limitation of saying, well, the relationship, I don't want to get in a relationship, you're telling your subconscious, okay, cool, you don't want a relationship with yourself. Bet. Let's give him more of the same so he doesn't, he's further away from himself. She's further away from herself. Let's give her some buzzwords. Let's help him listen to buzzwords. Everybody toxic. My mother was a narcissist. This, and this. Let's give buzzwords. Let's give some more buzzwords so the beneficiary say they don't have time. Time being emotion. They don't have the time to sit with themselves. They don't when they do get the chance to sit for themselves, they're automatically looking for the quick fix. They automatically looking for the quick fix. I don't know how many clients in the beginning of when I first started, when I went public with providing therapy, the therapy services. I don't know how many people came to me and they were like, okay, fix me. Okay, fix me. I don't fix you. I don't fix you. There's nothing to fix. I help you acknowledge and separate these things into these categories so we can actually work on them. The hardest thing to do is sit with yourself. One of the biggest things I tell people, like, yo, you can't, if you mad, you upset, and you feel some type of way, and you feeling some type of way, sit down with yourself for 15 minutes. I ain't got 15 minutes. Then take 30. I ain't got 30 minutes. Sit down with yourself for an hour. Why you keep going up in the time if I say I ain't got no time for the 30? Because if you ain't got time for 15 minutes, you got to sit with 30 minutes to understand why you ain't got time for the 15 minutes. If you ain't got time for 30 minutes, that means you got to sit down for an hour to figure out why you have not got time for the 30 minutes. See, you got to accept that process. You got to accept that when you wrote out, okay, cool, I got to do the work now. What's the work? But am I looking at this work? The first thing I got to realize is the first thing that I got to knock out. First thing I got to knock out is I've been taking on work as an employee. So I'm thinking about seniority. Think about, we do it all the time. I've done all this work. Don't nobody know me. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. We throw out all these lines to stay within the employee and stay because we didn't read the employee handbook. I never really liked the term of letting go. It's accepting. Because once you start accepting things, the natural process, things start actually dissipating by themselves. Once I'm gonna give an analogy. Think about this analogy. If you've been through so much trauma and then you develop friendships based on trauma bonds, and now whether it was drinking buddies, smoking buddies, fuck buddies, B&E buddies, buddies, crime buddies, whatever it was, trauma buddies, and you no longer are a part of that life. You're saying, nigga, I want to get my life right. Let's say this is when most people say, I'm going to give my life to Allah, give my life to Christ or whatever. I'm going to go be a Hebrew Israelite or whatever it may be. What are those people? They're not, it's not like they're no longer friends. They were never friends. They were associates based on your trauma. Your baby father was an associate based on your trauma. So what is your mother once she becomes Diane? When you take her back to being Diane? What's her name? What is she now? She was associated to you based on the same traumatic. She gave you through that resentment through the resentment that she was feeling and hoping that that relationship would be fixed by having you, and the resentment when it didn't work. Is that flawed just like the rest of us? And that resentment, now you get to look at the root of the resentment. Now you accept the root of resentment. My resentment, I was designed through resentment. I was created through resentment. So it was only natural that energetically things came to me that were based on resentment. Things came to me based on that guilt and that shame, energetically. So I needed things to make me to experience guilt. To experience guilt. And until I deal with these resentments and guilt, the best part about it is when you now step out of the employee aspect of mentality and you come into that business standing and you're really doing your work, and now you're stepping into the elements of your purpose. Your purpose has always been there. You always had elements of it, but now they're in full swing. Everything that you do that's based on your aspects of your purpose, all you got to do is show up. And that's the shortened version, but all you got to do is really show up. When it comes to, if you go look at my page, this is your first time rocking with me. If you look at everything from my TikTok page, if you go follow me on my YouTube channel, Papa Samdi, if you go to my business page, got a co-alchemist on my Facebook, and you look at all those things, when I really started stepping into my purpose and actually building out my space, that means building a new business, building a new business entity, establishing my new irrevocable trust. My trust is actually a domestic trust. My trust is a domestic trust. And what I mean by domestic trust or offshore trust, my trust is more of an offshore trust in the spiritual sense. That means all of my energy, all of my pertainments, all of my information, how I navigate the grantor, the trustees, the beneficiaries, all of those aspects and idiosyncrasies in my contracts now that I write out, they all in the spiritual space. So now I actually do have access to my Samdi energy, my Baron energy. I do have access to my Lucifer energy. I have access to my energies in full. I have access to my energies in full. I can now understand and sit and understand, like, wait, this is why these relationships came to me and they were so important. It was the fact that I was approaching these relationships as an employee, meaning I didn't want it to be temporary. You become that energy. Since I'm not applying it as an employee, when I go up to the energy, I'm not like, no. Me one-on-one with it. I have to understand, like, I use simple parts that I teach in class. That's the key. That's the game. That's the game. Everything you doing now is to set up for what's next. If you looked at Supernatural, let's use Supernatural, the show Supernatural as an example, or use originals or any example when they show you somebody's in their heaven. They're in their heaven. It's always a state or a space that they've built out the space. Let's use the example of Supernatural when Bobby died. And he was stuck in that small little room and it kept disintegrating. And he had a choice. He didn't build it out far enough because he spent his whole entire life in conflict. So he never had no time to build anything out. He didn't write no will and testament. He didn't write out his executive plans. This is how you summon me. This is how you work with my energy. He never said. So I use one of the examples I use myself. Now I'm going to slide to me, use myself as the example. One of my biggest examples in a lot of my earlier lives, lectures, and classes that are on my YouTube channel, you'll hear I will always say, do not ever say protect him and save him. We got to protect him at all costs. Never say you're going to save me. We got to protect me at all costs. Because I'm not a martyr. That is the frequency and formula of creating martyrs. That's creating martyrs. I'm not a martyr. I'm a heretic. I'm not a martyr. That's when we actually have to build this, that, and that goes into the aspects of really building it out. Like if I ask the simple question, when I had to ask myself the simple question, I ask myself that question in the mirror every day. Even now, I ask myself that question. It never stops. The version of myself that I see doing things. What does that person look like? What does that person look like, smell like, feel like? What is that man? What does that nigga spit taste like? I got to activate all the senses to have access to that energy. If you say, for example, you want to own a home. Let's use that as an example. You want to own a home. The version of you that owns a home is not a renter. The difference between you and the person that's renting is the information that the owner has. I have access to the information that the owner has now. I must now go into the process of using and creating and using that energy. One of the biggest things that I do in the aspect of making things practical is using, similar to this example that we're using tonight, is there's nothing's off limits. I'm not limiting myself to, well, I can't use that information because it's by this person and that person and that person. Because when you really go sit down and you start listening to some of this information, give it up to the guy, Bobby Hemming, when he said that, like, yo, they using your stuff all the time. Go on YouTube, not now, of course. Go on YouTube and type in how to build a trust, how to establish a business trust. And there's a video, I forgot the name of it, but it's like it's a sequence of videos, and it's three white guys. One's the financial lawyer, one's a lawyer, and the other two own the I think they're like called the Elevation Group. I think it's like the Elevation Group. I want you to think about it, the Elevation Group. And he's saying everything from scribe. He's sitting here drawing out what a trust is, and all he's drawing is symbols. He's drawing triangles, he's drawing arrows, he's drawing symbols, he's using symbols the entire time to explain everything. And I'm like, boy, goddamn, boy, but this is the key. Here's the key. Approaching that as an employee, approaching that through your trauma, you're going to be like, they're stealing our stuff. How can let's go into the truth of that. Then you want to go get the information like, we created the whites, man. We created the white people. We created the other races. We created the other colors of the people. We created the red man, the yellow man, the brown man, and the white man. We created those colors. Okay, cool. That means they're your children. What do your children do when you were a kid and you were looking at your uncles and your parents and people? You automatically emulated what you saw them do. Even if they forgot that they did it, you emulated it. So what do you think that they're doing? Ain't none of it off limits. Is this that you keep putting limitations and titles on things so you can avoid taking control of yourself. So you can avoid taking the ownership and step into that business of becoming and actually building it out, the tradition, building it out in an actual sense. Exactly. Just go get the information. But you're sitting there inside of that space with yourself and you're like, nah, it can't be that way and it can't do it this way and it can't. Go get the information. Just go get it. Sit with it. Your situation can't get to you. The worst thing that can happen to you is that you gon' what's the worst thing that happen? You gonna die? That's it. If that's the worst, if the worst case scenario is I go away, I really ain't got no limits. Really ain't got no limits. Really ain't got no, I ain't got no limitations on me. All I got to do, all I have to do is show up. All I got to do is show up. All I got to do is show up. 1 second, guys, as we 1 second, guys. 1 second. Wait. Oh shit, go back. All right, go back to that. All right, cool, we back. But now every time I'm inside of that space and I'm making these moves, now it's like I'm not even thinking about things. Because now this is when you want to say, I'm a God. A God creates. A God creates. A God or a goddess creates. A king and a queen surveys. A king and a queen, a king or a queen surveys. A prince or a princess. We ain't even talking about knighthood. A prince and a princess is where you at in the beginning of the aspects of your trauma. That princess or that prince, that knight, whether male or female, that knight aspect, that's the inner child and the inner adolescence. Exactly. The only thing that I have an understanding for in the aspects, just use that analogy. If someone showing me, if I need to learn how to fix a car, is if they know what they're doing. Regardless if they know what they're doing or not, all it is going to be a lesson in my initial. It's now in a. This is the key. This is the motherfucking key. When I'm sitting inside of that space and I'm learning, I know that the first step is going. I know the first time I'm doing it, I'm going to bump. I'm going to fall on my damn head. So what better way to cushion the blow of falling on my head? Sometimes you do have to fall. What better way to cushion my fall rather than observing somebody else doing something that didn't happen right? See, when you get into that space with that aspect, you start looking at things of that nature, you'll notice why you keep seeing the same. If right now you go on your Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is, and you keep seeing the same, you keep seeing people complaining, you keep seeing conspiracy theories, you keep seeing all these complaints, you keep seeing all the monkey see, monkey do stuff, you keep seeing spiritual scam artists, you keep seeing all that shit. That shit is present in your life. That's the only reason that's the only way that it shows up. Because I'm at a point now when I go up and down my timeline, I don't see any of that. And when I do see it, it's now I can just laugh at it. See, when you're doing that internal work and you're actually doing the internal work and you're now changing your perspective, the space that you once held based on fear, remember, fear is a fast-paced wave. Fear is a fast-paced wave. That fast-paced wave literally creates a box and it constricts you. But when you come into the actual aspect, this when we step out of the aspect of I'm looking for love, and I'm like, wait, I got to get into the love state. The love state. The higher states of the frequencies of energy. I can't have love in the aspects of fear. If I'm looking for love, I'm in fear. I'm doing it based on lack. If I'm looking for happiness, I'm basing it on fear or based on lack. If I'm looking for attention, I'm doing it based on lack. If I'm feeling jealous, I'm doing it based on lack. I can't bring any of that down into fear. This is this is like one of the biggest things when I'm working with a client and they're like, when people come to me for the first time, I'm like, I need to work on my throat chakra. All right, cool. What about your root chakra? Yo, I need to work on my third eye, get my third eye, how I get my third eye open. What about your root chakra? Man, man, I'm getting all these downloads about wars and I'm going to war in all the other fucking realms. What about your root chakra? The energy's always gonna meet you where you at. It ain't gonna meet you where you want to go. This shit is exact. See, because of that low level of emotional intelligence, you can't see it as exact. All the lessons that you need to develop your emotional intelligence and bring that shit up to that, you got the aspect of elevating these elements of yourself. Because all of these elements got to be elevated before you can actually transcend. You can ascend all day. But if you still got the issue, if you still got that same issue in a state of unresolved with your mother, and you keep leveling up, you're going to keep meeting more and more aspects of your mother. So let's get even deeper in that aspect. If your mother, let's say your mother was a single mom, that means she had to be that means she had to sit in her masculine seat and let go and allow her feminine aspects to dissipate. So now you keep meeting women that are now we look at the projection on a major scale. We'll pull it all the way back. Now you get to see podcast modern day women and feminism and all this. You seeing all this hitting you in your head and you getting triggered by it. Women just need to be women and da da da. You trying to create the same box. The reason that you're trying to create a box is because you stuck in the same box. It corresponds to what you are. Everything that you get is feeding from you. You project it, it comes back, you see it, you get triggered, oh my God, and you keep doing it over and over again. The biggest thing about even when it comes to a detox, if you can't let go of it for you can't let go of it for 72 hours, that's your deeper issue. Take time away from social media. Take time away from it. Take time away from the TV. But you're not taking time. You're not taking time away from it. 1 second. That's another thing about those keys and those codes that we go through. Everything you trying to do, are you like when from the employee mindset? There's no replacing. See, that's the key. That's the key. That's the key. A lot of times when we get an aspect like, oh my God, I feel empty, we immediately want to refill. That's the aspect of what did you need it for? You got to understand, what did you need it for? Not the collective buzzword term of social media was a trap and up. What did you use it for? Every time you went on your Facebook, what did you go look for? Every time you went on social media, you went on Instagram, what did you go look for? Every time you went on YouTube, what did you go look for? What did you go look for? Every time you went to go look at it, what did you go look for? Once you sit with that, now you know what to actually put into that space. Now you know what you're going to put inside of that space. Like, for example, for me, when I took my break away from social media, I had to understand what I needed it for. The original reason that I created my Facebook page, the original reason that I created my Instagram page, the original reason I created my Facebook page was when I was in school. When I was in school, basically I was getting in contact with a bunch of people, different people. I created Instagram because everybody had an Instagram page. Let me see what's over here. So when I look back, when I was first going back and looking at my pages, and I did my first scale, like this is like in the beginning. I remember the first time I started posting conscious stuff and all this information. I just kept posting stuff on my page. I remember my Facebook. I tell this story all the time. My Facebook page went from like the 1,200 followers or the 2,000 followers. My shit dropped down to like 750 to 500. The numbers dropped down. And I felt bad. I felt all the emotions was coming up. But I sat in it. I'm like, yo, why everybody falling off my page and all this and everybody falling off or unfollowing me? I'm noticing every time I scroll up, now I'm seeing like people that used to be my friends are now back in my suggested friend list. And I'm like, I had to learn and be like, yo, why am I not? Do I need to press that button to make them a friend again? Do I need to go ask them? Do I need, maybe I should make a post of like, everybody want to fall off whenever you when you going through something bad. Now I wasn't doing dumbass posts. Because all I was doing every time if I even agreed to a post like that or even had that thought, I was trying to dissociate. See that aspect, when you come into the aspects of that detox, the first 3 days of the detox is dissociation. The first 3 days of a detox is dissociation. And those 3 days of dissociation should have happened before you started the detox. That means if I say I'm about to take a 30-day detox, which I'm going to do mine in February, like in the beginning of the year, I'm going to do a 30-day detox. That means at least 15 days before that, at least 2 weeks before that, I need to make that plan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now I'm sitting in that space. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me go back and assess. All right, cool. I'm going to go this day, this many days with water. So let me explain. Let me learn the definition of what water is for me. Of course, you go get the original information. Your body needs at least a gallon of water a day. You need at least a gallon of water a day. You'll read some information like that's as you say with that. You'll look at some self-help stuff, and they'll be like, your water, your pee's not supposed to be dark. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be clear. But then you start reading some more information. Your pee's supposed to be a light champagne color. If your pee is clear, that means you are overhydrated. That means your system's overhydrated and your body cannot properly flush. So then you start reading that information. So then you start applying these mechanics to your space. And then now you go into that first day of the detox. All right, first day, second day, third day. Fifth day get real tricky. Because now you come into the detachment. See that fifth day of your detox, around the fifth and the sixth day, that's detach. That's when the state of detachment happens. That's when you start realizing what the food was. Remember, everything down here is emotion. So you start looking, okay, now the burger I was eating, the food I was eating was to supplement a certain emotion. It was to supplement this emotion. I needed the sugar. I needed it. Wait, but let me go deeper into the science of this. When I eat food, when I drink water, this is the flush. This is the flush the system. When I eat something, that means when I consume something, physically physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, when I digest something, I'm taking the fluid, I'm taking that and bringing that into a fluid-like state. So I'm absorbing it based on what has been flushed. But if I'm overfilling my system on water, so my body cannot regulate, i.e., water, i.e., the fluid of life, i.e., that fluid of life, i.e., my emotion that helps me keep my emotions moving. Then when I try to absorb new information, I can't fully absorb it. It's going to be met with something. So now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stop eating meat. I'm going to become vegan. Now I'm vegan. I'm better because I'm vegan because now I'm eating right. But the same food you ate when you weren't vegan, plant-based, you just replaced a bunch of vegan foods with that. Instead of you eating hamburger meat, yeah, that cold turkey only lasts until cold turkey only lasts until that emotional space, till that emotional reset, until the emotions reset. Because every time you go cold turkey with something, you're only doing it until the emotion reset and it dissipates, till the emotions go back down. And if it gets down low enough, then you want to refill it. All right, cool. I'm gonna refill. So now, use the example where I was talking about eating red meat. Instead of me eating red meat, I'm gonna eat quinoa burgers. See, I'm gonna eat quinoa burgers because they're healthier, but I'm still eating it. I'm still feeding the same emotion. I'm still feeding the same emptiness. It don't matter what I put in my system. I'm still feeding the same emptiness. I'm still feeding the same emotional current. I'm still feeding the same space. So I have to understand. Okay, cool. All right, day by day process. Because we think just we think about cold turkey. You think about cold turkey. Okay. If I go this many days without it, then I'm good. Mm-hmm. If I go this many days, I'm good without it. But then all of the emotions that come up while you're going through that detox, how are you dealing with them? Who are you sitting with? The intention, the food serves the emotion, whatever you're trying to digest, it serves as the catalyst to that emotional point. It just serves as a catalyst. You're just trying to replace something. So remember, as I said, you stated earlier, that aspect sitting inside of that space with yourself, and now you sitting there, got that contract on the table. All right, cool, new contract. Here we go. Sign this. You still saying the sign? You sign the most of the stuff people do in the aspects of that spiritual stuff. We're gonna get deeper in that in another live. But a lot of things that we do, we're trying to do in the aspects of replacement. I don't know how many people have came to me talk about. So, what do you think about celibacy? I don't. What do you mean you don't think about it? I don't think about it. What do you think about celibacy? I think I'm gonna be celibate until somebody shows their proves that they're worthy of me. So what you're saying to yourself is in your subconscious is I am not worthy of a relationship, so I'm going to halt this energy. Remember, energy doesn't stop. It must move. Energy doesn't stop. It must continue to move. So anything that you do and you go into a state with something, you are acknowledging, you are now acknowledging to yourself that, hey, this needs to be assessed. This needs to be learned. So everything that's about to come up is going to come up based on that. Now I get to look at it energetic. Since I'm detoxing or releasing myself from it and accepting it as it is, I now get this. I'm accepting it as it is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Grand evening. I was like, man, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, because this the wild part when I first went plant-based and went vegan, I was doing it, and then I was like excusing myself for the ancestors. Like my grandmother likes chicken fried, my grandmother liked KFC, or this cousin likes pizza, or this relative or ancestor likes Chinese food. So I'm only eating this for the ancestors. I'm only eating that for the ancestors. But I'm sitting there looking at myself like, why am I lying to myself? Because I wanted to populate my space. This is when we come into that. Think about the aspect when you come into your trust. The aspects when you're establishing your new business and you're establishing that new LLC, your limited liability company. When you create a limited liability company, the natural process of a limited liability company is it has a natural barrier within it to keep things from coming to you in a personal sense. That means, exactly as he just said with the aspects, I want to be vegan. You use being vegan, or we using being vegan. You're using being, I'm in this occult science. I'm a occultist. You're using these titles to avoid dealing with yourself. But the longer that you're not avoiding with yourself, as we were talking about, as we was building in this earlier, remember that shit gotta keep happening. So you're an occultist, but what's the definition of an occultist? The occult means the hidden. What's the first law of the 7 laws of the universe? The mind is all and everything is mental. So the occult will be my subconscious. So I'm an occultist. I'm an occultist. I'm an occultist. I'm an occultist. I live in the dark. No, you don't. Because the darkness is purity. You're living inside of the conflict with your shadow. Mm-hmm. You're avoiding your shadow. The shadow is where you get stuck at. The shadow is the aspects of conflict. The shadow is conflict. Mm-hmm. The shadow, the psychological aspect of you. All of that unresolved, all of that information that now presents itself. So now you're angry. Now you're trying to validate your anger. I deserve to be angry at people. I deserve to be angry at people. The way they treated me, they deserve to get. They don't deserve any of this. So you're saying that they're not entitled to it. What you're living in is an entitlement, because your ego is going to keep you in a state of entitlement. Your ego is only your ego being your boss or running the game for you is going to keep you in a state of entitlement. So now any information that you absorb is going to be fractured. The information cannot come in. The information cannot come in to create a new nothing, because there's something in front of it. You can't come into the state of the nothing or the darkness and truly create anything. You can't come into the darkness. And you'll use everything else to, I can't come into the darkness. Bad and good. So you write out the new contract. You write out this. So basically what you're doing in the aspect you write out, you can't write out your will and testament, because your will and testament is definite and absolute. You are preconceiving the instructions that you're using to move forward. That's why it's so important when we talk about, when I break down in my students, is like, right, when you write out a petition, you write out all these petitions, all exact. You didn't went to the store and you didn't graduated from the Food Line and the Walmart base bay leaves, and you didn't came into the expensive Spice Islands bay leaves, and you writing on the back of the bay leaves, prosperity, abundance, wealth, and health. But that's going to be, it only goes to where you at. So if you're only thinking about wealth, but the true aspects of wealth, when we think about wealth, Wealth has to be built. You have to build something for wealth. So let's use that example when I said earlier in the aspects. If you had $18 million presented to you, you ain't even got nothing to put it in. You ain't even got the account set up to do that. Mm-hmm. You ain't even got the account to put $18 million in. You put 18 million. If you think about it like this, if you put $18 million straight into your account, it automatically gets flagged, and it's now the government is now the IRS and the government now looking into your account. So now you spending off that $18 million. Man, why all these people coming at me? Because you attracted it. Because you dropped that money in it. You dropped that in there with no direction. You didn't understand. You didn't know how to put it in there. But if I take that $18 million and I break it down into $9,000 deposits or $5,000 deposits, just to be safe, because anything over 10,000, you know they hit the account if you didn't know that. But if I take that $18 million, this $18 million, and I got it sitting up here in an account up here in my trust, and I've created a parameter for it, i.e. life insurance. Like, let's say I created a life insurance policy, and I put it in my life insurance policy inside of my trust. I created a grantor for my trust. That was my lawyer. My lawyer created my trust. The company created my trust. I'm the executor of my trust. I'm not the executor. I'm the executor of my trust. My company is now the executor of my trust. Now I can manage it. See, this is the game when you now slide down, because now that I have my new trust established, my grantor was the legal aspect that put it together for. I had it. We sat down, put it together. I got my executive in there. 5%. I learned how to put that in there. And now I got the beneficiaries being my subsidiaries or my companies. I got those laying in there. Now my companies, now I got this company under these aspects. Now I got my company right here, my corporation, my LLC, my first LLC, which is me. I got 5% in that, of ownership of that. I got 5% of the whole kit and caboodle, but I got control of everything from that space. Now I can actually manage it. Now I actually can manage it. Now, when I build things out, now instead of me feeling the rush or the need to do something based on my parents said I should have did this, and my dad said I should have did this, and they said, now I can build it out. See, now I can build it out. See, now, and I use the example. I'm going to use my build as an example. My company, my first LLC, when I first went public in 2020, before that, it was 4 years of building it out, was G.O.D Alchemist LLC. G.O.D Alchemist LLC is my first imprint, and it's the imprint for my spiritual therapy, everything from the spiritual therapy classes, chakra energy work, things, everything of that nature, everything under the sun. That's when I first created, that's when Papa Lucifer Samdi first came to the surface, first materialized on the physical plane, and I first took on that body of energy. This is what it is. Go listen to Jay-Z. Go listen to that God Did song. Listen what Jay-Z said in the whole damn song. There's nothing to replace. It's just elevating all of these things. Now go back to this. Before I even came to that point, when it came to all that information and being in that sense, before getting to that space with myself, before that, I wanted to be a nutritionist. I wanted to be an herbalist. I wanted to be a personal trainer. All these other things I wanted to be. All these things that I wanted to be were aspects that I use now. See, there's another part of the key. A dream does not die until it's come into fruition. A dream does not die until it comes into fruition. In 2003, that's when I went to college. I'm sitting there, I'm going to college, and how I paid for college is, I don't feel bad for everybody that wanted to party and dance and ecstasy pills and all that fun stuff. So I paid for college. You have to own, and that's the biggest part. You got to own how you got to that space. I know I did some seedy type things back then, but it was all under the guise of, I just want to be accepted and loved. It was all through fear, but I went through it. My first thing was psychology. Went to school for psychology and business. I didn't think about using psychology or business because of the common narrative. Black people don't go to therapy. But I didn't understand the reason that the reason I went to psychology for the first place for myself was to understand my own mind and my own genetic my own makeup. So I didn't have a full understanding of it. So I couldn't use it. But I achieved it. I got it. I spent 15, 20 years in restaurants after that. Spent 15, 20 years in restaurants. Why would you go to restaurants? Business. It's a business. Hell, dealing with people, managing people's emotions. That's basically what I was learning inside of those spaces. So wait, that's what my jobs were. Slowly but slowly, I was stepping out of the employee mindset. That's what all them jobs were. Because my job paid me for every hour, even when I sat out in the car. My job paid me for every hour, even if I had someone clock me in early. It paid me for every hour. The presumption of a job is not to help me pay bills. It's based on production. So my biggest gripe with my job was I wanted something else to take accountability for my production. I wanted something else to take responsibility and accountability for my productivity. Your job shows you your path in life. In me working in restaurants for 15 years, as that example, me working in restaurants, I learned everything from customer service. I learned everything, even learning how to cook. I learned promotions. I learned everything that I use now in an analog sense. Everything your job teaches you is teaching you in an analog sense. And if you get stuck in the aspect of, oh my God, I'm tired of this now, look at this key. There's people right now that are mad at shit being now digital. You got people around you right now that say, I don't like Facebook. I don't like using YouTube. I would start a YouTube channel or a podcast, or I would write a book, or I would do this, but someone going to take my information. Someone cannot take what comes naturally. They can take what naturally comes from you. But when it comes time to build on that, they can't build on it. So what are you worried about? I needed to give somebody else the blame. I learned everything from production. See, my thing with my jobs, funny that you said that. I love that you put that out there. My biggest thing at all of my jobs, I don't like authority. I'm an Aquarius. I don't like authority. So I had one or two choices. This is when my mentor taught me this. One of my mentors taught me this. Coolest Italian guy I ever met. He taught me this. He was like, you don't like authority. I was like, you right. He was an Aquarius too. You don't like authority. He said you got one or two choices. Either you become authority and you understand what it is to become authority, or you keep running away from authority. See, what I don't like or what I didn't like, I had to understand. My boss is standing over me. For an example, and this is how we get into childhood wounds. My boss is standing over me, and the reason that it ticked me off so much was because it was reminding me of my pops. My pops was very, very Catholic. My pops was very, very militant. He was in the military. He was very, very military minded. So whenever it came to us doing anything, he always had this habit of standing over us. He was very, very military minded. So whenever it came to us doing anything, he always had this habit of standing over us. You always stand over me. He meant well, but until I removed him from, hey, Pops, why you standing over me? And I got more, and I gained back into his story of his life, what he was under, he didn't have anybody to stand over him. My pops did a lot of this. My pops lived his life alone in a lot of things. He didn't get certain emotional guide. He didn't get emotional guidance. He didn't get emotional guidance. He didn't get emotional knowledge based in the aspects of his trauma. So naturally, he created his space. He created a space that was based on his own fear. So then when I came into my space, I had one or two choices. Either if someone's standing over me, let me move faster. Move faster real quick. They can't keep up with me. One thing about me, I know they ain't going to keep up with me. But once I resolved that aspect, with dear old Pop's transition earlier this year, he transitioned in January. Once I got over that aspect, shit started making more sense. In the last video that we did, the last live that we did that's on my YouTube channel, we got deep into that. And the aspects of breaking that down. So I was like, let me get to the root of this. Now I'm inside of that space. From that point, then I became the authority. And then my next line of things that I had to learn in the aspects of building out the contract, the new state of contracts and the new state of my business with myself, was I didn't like my managers. I didn't like none of my managers. But I had to understand why I did not like them. I didn't like their energy. One of my managers, at my last job 5 years ago, at my last job, one of my managers was a Scorpio. He was a Scorpio. He was a Scorpio male in his lower sense of self. My rising is a Scorpio. See, this is how we start making it. You got to use this to be practical. Like I use another example before I build that example up. Another example. My mother is an Aquarius. Her moon is in Gemini. Her moon is my North Node. Her we share the same rising. So now I understand why me and Dorothy butt heads a lot and had certain conversations, was angry a lot of times. When I look at the aspect of Sagittarius, Libra, I had to understand to make these energies practical. It wasn't just saying, you're not gathering information just to be like, I'm never going to talk to another Aquarius. I'm never going to talk to another Taurus. I'm never going to. It all connects. What you're coming into that space for is to understand how it connects. Remember, there's no such thing as a coincidence. There's no coincidence that my two of my sisters are Scorpios, and my baby sister, which is now 22 now, is a Sagittarius. She's literally legit my South Node. And if you know anything about your South Node, you're expanding, you're shifting from your South Node to your North Node. So I was born first, Gemini North Node. My sister was born last, Sagittarius South Node. So when I look at my sister, I have a conversation with my little sister, as she's now coming into her healing, because now all I can do is show it. Now she's coming into her healing aspects and dealing with herself. The biggest thing about the South Node, the Sagittarius, is the aspects of old convictions, right and wrong. It should be like this, control, manipulation, things of that nature. The things that she developed and learned. It all connects. Because until I started understanding these aspects, I couldn't step into this space or this realm with myself to build anything out. Because I would only build to a certain point. I would only get that job and work. Another thing about me, and I do it all the time, every one of the jobs that I ever worked at, I only worked at 5 years. I worked at 5 years. By the third year at any job that I worked, the last 2 years was me going through the motions. I was just going through motions. People will say, man, you like you about to die. You like you overrunning yourself. It wasn't until my last job that I understood the reason of my jobs. And I started making different decisions in the aspects of my purpose. I started making aspects in my purpose. I remember the first time I remember September 13th, 2019. September 13th, 2019 was my first live. My first live on my YouTube channel. First live ever. First live. Before that, I did a couple episodes of my podcast. I remember it came to a point, it was February 14th. I remember the year before, I made a habit of always requesting my death day off. It's a process. 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 Trust me, it wouldn't. Trust me, you think, man, I was the weak. You know how much stuff I had. The thing about me staying in that space, because I built out a program that was so daunting. I built out a maze and program that was so daunting that it forced me to stay inside of that space. Get the job. What happens after you get a job? You got to get in a relationship. You gotta get married, gotta have kids. So everything that I was doing, everything that was covering my space was fitting that old narrative of the narrative that I saw my pops go through, the narrative that I saw my mother go through, my family, the other family, my karmic family went through. So now I built out that space based on that. So yeah, now I got the job. Now I'm about to go get the car. Now I'm about to go get the crib. Now I'm in the relationship. Whether she got kids, no kids, whatever, she got her own anger issues. She got issues. How are we connecting? Ooh, we connecting because we both got issues with our mother. We got connecting because she ain't never had a father in her life. Ooh, I'm a father figure. I wanna prove that I can be a better man than my dad was and be emotional and show my emotions and shit. All of these aspects that I put inside those spaces. So those 5 years, you only do what you know. The key aspect in understanding the aspects of that employee mindset is you only can emulate from your unresolved. When you're living inside of that traumatic state, you only can emulate from the unresolved because you have nothing else. You only can emulate. It isn't until you start dealing with these resolved aspects and the trauma aspects and start clearing out that you actually can start creating space, creating new spaces in order to create. I can't create from a fear-based space. I only can emulate, i.e., Yadal the Broth, i.e., Pistis de Sophia. I've talked about these before. I.e., the whole story of the demiurge. That's all about you. You pierced the veil and fell out and started creating things out of anger. Out of the resentments that you had. You created your whole world out of resentment that you had. Everything had to stay below you. That's why everything was pulling you down. Because that kept your that kept all of your beneficiaries fed. That kept all of your emotions, that kept all of those wounds fed. But the moment somebody challenged you, says, so what? I remember the biggest thing that happened to me. Was I remember one time I stepped into my job, right? I went to my job. It was my first time going with like the big bosses, like the bosses. I was going out with the bosses. And this is how your life repeats itself. My father was always around the bosses when he was in Jersey and Philly and these places where he was at, Florida, where he was at. He was always around the Italians, the bosses, and all of that aspect. So in my life, that became the same thing. So I needed those reflections. This is another aspect of understanding why you needed that person. No matter how bad it hurt to a certain point, to a degree, they were needed to be there as the gateway for you to come through to get to your point. So I'm around all of the bosses. I remember I showed up late. I remember I came in, I went in, I was driving my boss' car. He said, "You driving? Charlie, you driving tonight?" I was like, "All right, cool, I'll drive." I drive his car. One of the other managers shows up late. We didn't all have food. We didn't all have drinks. Because the biggest thing for like restaurant managers, like, and especially when you're opening up new restaurants, I'm inside of a space where whenever a new restaurant opened up, we would go see the new restaurant. Big thing from when you go into that space, like you go check the territories out. Literally on some mafia type shit. You go check out the territories. So I'm getting to go check out new territories. Somebody shows up and like, yeah, my wife was doing this, this, and this. My boss's boss was sitting across the table from me. He was like, he looked at that man dead in his face. And he said, so you ain't got your bitch in check? This is a white guy. This is a Idaho potato white guy, white boy. Looking at this black dude sitting beside me saying, you ain't got your bitch in check? We all paused, gasped for air, like, what the fuck? And he's just saying like, you don't have your home, you're not having your home in order has nothing to do with you being late. You paying for the next round. You paying this tab. You paying the tab. That gave me something to think about. Was like, wait, I'm showing up to a lot of these, when you're showing up to a lot of these events in your life, and you got the emotional shit on the table, or you got a problem or an issue, you got a problem with these issues, nobody cares about the issues. See, the name of this aspect when we come into discernment, detachment is compassion. See, the love state is compassion. I don't care about anything, but I have the utmost compassion and to the ability to understand without bias, without judgment, and a full acceptance of whatever's happening inside of a space. If something is presented to me, instead of my old trauma response was to provide a quick fix, my mind is now set to a solution. And I understand the solution is going to be having to sit inside of that space. So think about money. You got money issues. Man, all I need is $1 million. All I need is 10,000. All I do is hit the numbers just once. No, you don't. What are you doing now? What are you doing now that even reflects you making 1,000? What are you doing now that reflects 10 G's? Your bank account's in the negative. You got 16 overdraft fees in your bank account. And they're going to put 10 G's in there? So you saying you need $10,000 to do whatever you need to do, but your account ain't even balanced. Your account ain't even balanced. Your emotional account ain't even balanced. You saying you need something, but the account ain't even set. The space ain't even. You ain't even got the space made for that. The bed ain't made. So now since you're used to moving in that hype, this is what we talk about, that living in that hyper state. By the time you get to it or you get the opportunity, you automatically rush. But if I'm rushing, I'm gonna skip steps. Because I'm thinking as an employee and I'm not thinking as a boss. I'm not thinking as that manager. I'm not in that manager mindset. See, as the employee, you got a uniform. You get a uniform. You get a uniform. You might get a hat. Depending on how long that restaurant been there. You might get a shirt. Or you might have to wear a shirt, get some black pants, and you got a uniform. So the only thing that you got to take care of is your uniform. So you run your shoes out, got to go buy new shoes. So then you become into that manager state. Now you got to wear something different. So now you're used to wearing this uniform, that black tee, white tee, chef coat, whatever it is. It used to getting dirty. You ain't cleaning as you go, none of that. So what do you think you're going to do when you come into the manager space? Where it's more paperwork. So the same way you treated that space, the same way you're going to treat this space. Unconsciously, you're going to treat this same space the same way. You ain't cleaning as you go over here, wiping down, cutting. You ain't wiping down nothing over here. So now when you go into the office and you're doing paperwork, you got paperwork everywhere, money everywhere. And then the manager looking at me like, yo, you can't have all this money out all over the table. Man, I got busy. You sure you ready for this position? You said you was ready. But I'm seeing, I gave you a chance, and I'm going to have to let somebody else take over. And then you get upset. Who takes over? The person that was at, instead of you getting upset, and then you want to be like, see, man, I ain't a kiss ass, man. I ain't no kiss ass. I ain't kissing no ass, man. I ain't kissing no ass. You ain't going to have me kissing no ass in here, man. I ain't be kissing no ass. That's why I ain't going to be no manager. I can't be that, man. They're going to have me. I ain't sucking up to nobody. And none of my jobs that I ever suck up to anybody. I was always different anyway. I was through the aspects of me learning through my jobs, I was learning to be, I was separated from them anyway. I couldn't be both. A lot of my first lessons of I can't play on both sides of this I can't play on both sides. I got to stand firmly on my square. That's a lot of shit that I had to learn. But I had to understand that I had those childhood rejection issues, not being picked for certain sports. And then when I got picked for sports, it was because I was angry. So every time I came into that space, I didn't develop anything because I was not used to being to myself. I wasn't used to, okay, let me go over here and let me practice. And if they see, I was so busy on, if they see me shooting in the gym, then they're going to pick me if they see me making these shots. So I'm not developing in that space. I'm not developing any discipline. I'm only doing enough to do what I can. Short term, short term, short term. I'm stuck in the short term. Not realizing that as I'm building in the short term becomes the long term. Think about how many people you know right now from fucking high school. Whoo! Think about the people you knew from high school. I'm like me and like 3 people that I know of still ain't got no kids. No children. And I came from a space where by the 10th, 11th grade, motherfuckers all had kids. By 11th grade, motherfuckers all had kids. They were either pregnant on their second pregnancy. So I'm looking at my life and I'm like, yo, I experienced everything as I needed to experience it. So now when I sit in a space in my present, now I can actually build. Because the name of this aspect when you're building out your space is what you're doing now in your present is based on the tone that you set here. That's how you're creating all yeah. Everything that from me learning psychology, me going into aspects of psychology, me getting my nutritionist certifications, me getting all these certifications and all them shits. Even though they didn't work back then, because I would have burnt them shits out as soon as I used them. And I had those lessons of, ooh, yeah, I'm going to do this, burning it out. I didn't understand budgeting, money, any of that shit in that space. But now all of that set the tone to where the present was. And everything that I do now sets the tone for the next stage. You're setting up for your next stage. You're always present when you're setting up for it. If I'm in the present, I know I'm setting up for the next. Yeah. The past, the present, and the future are all in the same, they're all going on at the same exact time. If I'm stuck in my past, that means I'm emotionally stuck in my past, stuck in the trauma, unresolved in my past. Then every time I think about the future, it's only to rob myself. Only I can rob myself. Only I can betray myself. Only I can cheat myself. Only I can lie to myself. Only I can do the dishonor. Only I can do it. I can project it and say people are dishonoring me, disrespecting me, but ultimately that's on me. That's me doing it. That's me. They're not. They're the experiences. They're the projected experiences that I say, hey, I need somebody to do this. I'm cheating myself out of time. I'm cheating myself out of sleep. I'm cheating myself out of sleep. I'm cheating myself out of I'm cheating myself out of working out. I'm cheating myself out of learning. Let me put some shit in my space that's going to distract me, that's going to represent the distraction. What's this relationship over here going to represent? Distraction. I got dreams. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake what you're drawn to. So for like, use that example into that space. Example, you being drawn to real estate and financial health. You thinking about real estate and financial health. For me, looking at the aspects of real estate as an example, use real estate as an example. In order for you to actually come into the state of real estate, to use real estate as that aspect, and this example, that's you triggering getting your home in order. How you invest in your home, how you invest in your space, and taking that ownership of how you invest into your space and how you invested into your space. That way, as you now come into that state of the physical form or the physical manifestation of real estate and learning real estate, is going to coincide with those shadows or those elements that you haven't worked on yet. Not being good enough, not selling the house, and then the things that come up, oh my God, the market's terrible, and this, and this. You're going to start thinking in an analog manner, because the logical aspect and that traumatic experience is to think very, very analog. But that right side of the mind, that's the aspect, that's digital. People ain't selling houses the same way they used to sell houses. So the things that you coming into, you disrespected yourself. You disrespected yourself because you didn't understand the terms of what respect are. See, one thing that I learned, respect is unconditional. Respect is unconditional. Respect is unconditional. Love is a state of being, and in that state of being, respect is unconditional. That means regardless of how that means I can accept somebody fully as they are. But the respect that I have with myself, the discipline that I have with myself allows me to accept them where they are, take what I need, and understand I don't have to partake in that if it don't feel right. I know my feeling in that space. That goes there. There's another video, the other video on my YouTube. That takes me into the state of trust. That state of trust. Trust is based on capacity and ability only. The capacity and the ability. You can trust somebody to watch your kids, but you may not trust them with your money. Because they have the capacity that you've seen, the capacity to watch children, the capacity and the ability to take care of children, but they got their ability to take care of money is not that good. So that looks with you as like, okay, cool. What's my capacity with money? What's my capacity with understanding money? You know what I'm saying? What's my capacity with understanding money? What's my capacity and my emotional intelligence? Do I spend based off fear? Or do I spend actually based off what I need something? Am I spending based off fear? Or am I spending based on investing? And that brings you into that the loyalty space. That brings it all the way down into the space. It helps you be able to look at all the relationships now become different. I'm gonna get right back to that. All the relationships now become different because now I'm looking at relationships based on capacity and ability. But I had to build my space out first. This is where people are like, you don't gotta be alone while you healing. You know if you need to be by yourself if you're in your healing state. Because you know if you go into a space and you get triggered, you're going to get, oh my God, I was so far ahead, now I'm behind again. That means you know you needed to sit down. See, I built out my space. With God, I built out my space. Anybody that comes to me, now when I take the observation, I know people that are in the student space. I know people that are in the student space. They're students. I know people that are going to be, I know people that they're coming to me and they might need to be a client. So instead of me jumping and being like, yay, this person's spiritual and they're conscious and they're all these things and they meditate and they do yoga, that don't mean shit. That don't mean anything. You gotta learn to read people. I had to learn how to read myself first. So now when I'm presenting into these spaces, I understand the interaction with this individual, place, thing, idea. I'm meeting them where they're at. See, the kids, I'm meeting them where they at. I'm gonna meet. Okay, cool. I accept you for where you at, right there, exactly where you at. I accept it. Cool. We don't have conversations based on this level in this space. You have no choice. Since I've created a space that is not of bias, that is not of projecting, biased, and there's faults in it, and there's shadows, and there's shit that they can hide. You come into a space with me, whether you come to me for the consultation and we start your therapy sessions, or you come to the class, or you sitting there looking at me. Hello. Let's have a conversation. I'm not going to use biases. You can't look at me and be like, well, the last relationships that I was in, all these people didn't understand my worth. I'll ask you the question. What makes you a good person? What makes you a good woman? What makes you a good man? I cook and I clean and I pay bills. Congratulations, you're an adult. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. That doesn't make you any better than anybody just because you do that. Well, everybody comes into space there, you like people to acknowledge that. You like people to validate that about you. Oh my God, you was a clean person. Yeah, I'm clean. Yeah, I'm different. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I ain't like the other niggas. And then now they're inside of that space. Now they're gonna dump. Now they're gonna dump into that space. And if you built your space out and you have not cleared your space, or that space is not held for that space is held for guilt and shame and doubt and wounds and issues of that nature. That's what that space has to be filled with. So then you're looking at why you keep attracting the same exact person. Yo, I'm doing all this work and I keep attracting these same scallywags. I keep attracting these same dudes, same men, same women. Are you really doing the work? What are you building? Okay, if you've done the work, then the next level is building. What have you built out? What have you built out? What have you built out? I'm tired of my job. When you look at your job, what skills did you learn from your job that you can actually use in the practical real world of yourself right now? My last job was a restaurant, and you know restaurants got promotions. My last job that I worked at was Red Lobster. You know they got Lobster Fest and all the promotions. The main thing I learned was promotions and ads. Ads, promotions, budgets, ordering, the shit that I use now. Bringing it into a digital interface of everything that I do, from my YouTube channel to my TikTok to all of my other digital real estate, my Facebook, I'm really not on Instagram that much. That's neither here nor there. But now I know how to use these aspects inside of that space. So now when I show up in that space, what's meant for me in that space is now clear. Most people just love to complain. Like, man, my life is... Why? I'm solution-based. I'll listen one time. But here's the key. I'll let you know up front, like, yo, I will listen to what you're about to say one time. But after we have this conversation, the next conversation we're going to have is, what do we need to do? What do you need? What necessary elements do you need to fix this? And I'm going to listen to what you need to fix it. And I'm going to assess myself. I don't have that. You said, because this thing about it is, do you need money or do you need economic education? Because if you don't understand the difference between you needing money and you need financial literacy, then 9 times out of 10, that emotional intelligence is low. So we got to work on that emotional intelligence first. Before we bust out the book and look at the budget, before we bust out the look at the budget and look at how we gonna move and where we going, before you jump all the way over there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now I'm inside of that space, like, you know what? Yeah, I can. I don't have. I ain't got $100, but I do have this audiobook you can listen to. This is before I built out my stuff. Now I got it to the space where me now, like someone comes to me with an issue, I'm like, I ain't got that, but I do have a program. Sounds like you got some unresolved issues you need to work on. If you want to work on those, if you ready to work on those, yo, I'm your Titan. I got you. We can work on that all day. But what you trying to work on and where I'm at with myself, and where you at right now, I can accept you where you at in full compassion and understanding for where you're at and what you've been through. But what I'm at, the level where I'm at right now, with the things that I'm doing in that nature, we're not. It's they don't come with they don't correspond. And that takes, and this when we become real with it, that becomes the aspect. You gonna have that conversation with Shorty, gonna look you and be like, you ain't got it, you ain't got it. Bitch, I just told you I didn't have it. I don't have it for you. Man, you ain't. Yep, you right. Mm-hmm. Agree and move on. Why am I gonna get stuck? Why do I need to prove myself to things? Why do I need to further distract myself away from myself? Respect is unconditional. Respect is unconditional. Respect is based on my respect for everybody else is true, absolute acceptance for everybody where they're at. I can accept somebody as they are without trying to put amplifications and titles and limitations on them. Well, maybe they've been through this in their life and they've been through that in their life. It doesn't matter what they've been through inside of that space. I can accept them as they are because I've accepted myself as I am. So ultimately, they can't disrespect me unless they cannot disrespect me in an emotional sense, physical sense, in any shape or form, unless that is already present. If it's present within me, then hell yeah, they're going to disrespect me because the disrespect is already there. If they want to run complaints to me and everybody seems to want to bring their issues to me, that means, what am I saying to these people? I don't know what to say to them. Are you just listening? Are you asking questions? It is a long process. I would say it's a long process. One of the basics of cultivating, accepting people is always going to be where you've accepted yourself. First, looking at when you don't accept somebody for something that they say or do, it's always getting back to that root with yourself. Where did you learn it? Like, use for an example. I ain't been in the damn streets for fucking 20 fucking years. 38 years old. I ain't been in the streets since I was 25. I was out of the streets by the time I turned 21. I was out of the streets by the time I turned 21. When I got out of college and did my shit in jail for the year and 6 months for staying in that space. But I can accept people in where they're at. Like, if I see anybody, like, for example, if I go up the street, if I go somewhere and I see somebody that's in that space, in that lifestyle, that mentality, and they feel some type of way and they look mad. For me now, I can read energy real well. But back then, it was a real learning process. People look me in my eyes and be like, you don't look like this and you don't look like that. Man, you don't like you about none of this. I was like, why would I want to, why do I need to show it? So the biggest thing about my judgment of myself, when I get triggered, when someone says, you're not this and you're not that, or you could have been more of this, you need to be a man and do this, that manhood talk, people try to hit me on that shit. I had to really understand their definition and where their definition came from and understand how it triggered me, where I learned my definition from. Until I understood my definition, I was always judging others for their definitions. Until I accepted how I defined my life, defined those aspects of my life, I can accept others and how they define their life. Until I accepted how I spent money and how I defined money as a reason of control, I could not accept others that had a lack of control of money. So when I saw people with a lack of control of money, as an example, I would be triggered. But I had to, then I look at myself like, wait, the only reason I have a falsehood of control of money is because I got the job, the way I was raised. I'm looking at all those elements. Change yourself, change the world. Changing those elements out. And as I started changing those elements, after a while of just accepting everybody where they're at, accepting and not judging, and now I'm using discernment, a lot of those people disappeared. A lot of those NPC, non-playable characters disappeared. That's when I was like, oh my God, like I don't see the same people anymore. But now that left me, of course, as remember you said earlier, the aspect, now I'm feeling lonely. Now that I'm alone with myself, what do I need to, what can I do inside? What do I really need inside of this space? I really need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody I know I have my ancestors and I know I got the spirits and I know I can talk to them, but I need someone in the physical form to talk to. The same way that I call forth for a spirit, the same way that I call forth for like, yo, I need guidance. I need guidance. And where I couldn't find guidance, as I started developing myself inside of that space and going through those changes, I realized that a lot of those spaces where I could not find guidance was because I was meant to be the guidance in that space. So that helped me build out the new contract. That helped me build out being God Alchemist. Because before I came into my shit thinking about shadow work, inner child healing, the elements and the modalities for inner child healing, I didn't see anybody actually talking about it. Not into a depth that really would benefit me or benefit my energy or benefit where I was at. So I was like, after a while, it was like, wait, I still don't see it. But then I'm starting to notice that as I'm inside of that space and I'm learning those aspects, then I'm like, okay, cool. I'm noticing that I'm becoming that. This is the business of becoming. So now I'm noticing that I'm becoming a lot of those aspects. And as I was shifting into my purpose and becoming those aspects, yeah. And that's totally okay. You got to understand this. Your family in the sense that you came in through they're a karmic cycle. They're only associated to you based on certain levels of trouble, based on traumas and certain programs. Hell, some of the people in your family may be just non-playable characters. That means they're a part of a quest. Once you've gotten what you needed from that quest, it's time for you to shift. And once you separate from that, once you look at that from that, when we look at it from that space and do the work in that space, and you've been able to accept all of them, and this is the thing about accepting everybody in your family, it's not like you got to go one by one and accept every individual. Because when you started, let's say, for example, once I accepted my mother in full to herself, I remember the day my mom and my pops was in the kitchen, and I was about to before I was about to go out and go to work. I remember sitting there. I remember apologizing and thanking my parents, thanking them for everything. I remember thanking them for everything. I noticed that once I was doing things of that nature, once I accepted my mother, everything that my mother went through that brought her to that point, I understood because it was based on my mom's side of the family. So I was able to look at them no longer as auntie, cousin, cousin-in-law, whatever. I wasn't looking at them as that anymore. I could see them all in that same perspective. That also came to a point in time. I remember for like a long period of time, I remember every time I would have a conversation with my mom would always be like, they're always asking me, what are you talking about on Facebook? What are you talking about on here? You got to strip that title. Once you strip that title and you remove that installation, you've now created a live wire. And that live wire is necessary to kill you. See, there's the aspect of you shutting that down. I had to shut down I had to dissolve that trust. I had to dissolve the trust in which I once knew. My aspects of what I thought family was, I had to dissolve it. I had to remove myself from that existence so I'd actually start living. The more that I got more sitting in that balance of my living with myself, living in myself, and building and understanding and gaining my truth, I was no longer looking for answers. I was looking for truth. See, the biggest thing that happens in a lot of times in these traumatic situations, especially when it comes to family, you're looking for answers and you're not accepting truth. One of the biggest things that happens when I'm dealing with my clients is whenever we come to that point of like the mother issue or the issue with a cousin or the family members or the family secret is, I help them understand like, hey, your mother told you everything that you needed to hear. She told you exactly what you needed to hear. You just didn't listen to it. Whenever you ask your mom about this, does she hit you with guilt? Does she hit you with guilt? That's another key. I'm going to hold dot and put that dot right there. Get it out after I finish saying this. When you're sitting inside of that space, your mother sits here and she guilts you. And you're triggered by the guilt. She's giving you the answer. The dialogue that was created or the space that was created based on that, she's still living through that guilt. I can forgive her I can forgive myself, forgive her, not for her, but for me, I can forgive her in the aspects of what she went through and have true appreciation and acceptance that she went through what she went through because it wouldn't have brought me to where I'm at. I can thank her for that. I can forgive and I can forgive her. I can apologize for my own reactions and everything that I did, regardless if my mother at that point in time would say, I'm sorry. I'm not looking for them to say accept it or not. I'm saying this apology is a decree for myself so I can actually thank them. So now when I step out of that space, now I can do this work. This when we get into this aspect, we don't get into this deeper next week. But this when we come into that unification process. Before you can step into your purpose, before I can step into my purpose, I had to come into that self-unification. See, the key, the reason that healing and the shadow work process is going through that healing process is so important because until you do the healing work, you cannot unify yourself. Separation requires elevation requires separation. Once I've elevated, I must elevate these aspects of myself and bring them into unity. Thus, I've been married to myself since August 16, 2020. Been married to myself since August 16, 2020. I created a whole ceremony in the honor in marrying myself. In the honor of marrying myself. Becoming one in unison with myself. After I did that, before I did that, my purpose was peeping through. But after I did that, my purpose really came into shape. And I know that I'm inside of my purpose because even when I go into those spaces with family, my mother, sisters, family members, old friends, acquaintances, things of that nature, I notice a few things. Like for an example, there are about 5 or 6 people that are on my timeline that I knew from high school and school or whatever, that they're in their spiritual shit. They're in a spiritual shit. But also, I have friends and people that I consider brothers, family, that we just separated over time, and I can celebrate where they're at in their life. I can celebrate where they're at in their life. It may not be, for them, it's perfect, but I ain't looking at them like, yo, man, you can do better than that. Let me show you how to do this. I'm not looking at it like that. I can actually accept them inside of that space. So when people do come to me, all I got to do is show up. I'm available. I'll show up. I got a homeboy now that hit me in my messenger a couple hours before I even became live. He was like, yo, I really need to sit down and talk with you. It's been a minute. And I remember the last conversation I had with him. Exactly. Because it's not going to fit in your current life. What you're meant to do is not going to sync. It's not going to be able to fit in your life. Fit in your current life. What you are meant to do in your purpose is not going to coincide or be able to fit in the same space of your current life. You have to go through. This is why I always talk about that process of going through that the dark nights of the soul, or those soul deaths, or those reincarnations into the present state, until you're able to actually sit inside that present state and build it out. Nothing I'm doing now would fit in my old life. You automatically go in observation mode. Once I started really sitting in the aspects of my purpose and actually doing the work, building it out, there was so much new shit that I had to do. Everything was like, learn. It was like being in ultimate developer mode. If you go, like, use for an example, I remember when I first started doing lives. I don't like looking at people. I'm like, this right here, what we doing right now, if you came to me 7 years ago, I don't do this. I'm not live. I'm not talking to you. I won't eye contact. I didn't know I do none of this. But I remember the first time, but it took me a step. Like, one example, if you go to my page on Facebook, my Godical Alchemist page, and go all the way down to the bottom, or you go all the way down to the bottom. I remember when I started my shit, I started the God Thoughts. God Thoughts, it was like a blog post, little spiritual. It was either motivation, elevation, something that I learned, or some lesson that I was created on my run or my walk. But I had to create the space for, like, before I got to work, I would get to work early, had to take the bus, or I had to walk to work or whatever, things of that nature. So, like, as I'm walking to work, all these thoughts going in my head, I'm like, let me write these down. Until one time it was too cold outside for me to just sit out there and be typing with my hands. So I had my phone in front of me. If you go on my YouTube channel, one of the first videos that I did was You're a God. And I did my first live. I'm looking all over the place. I'm not looking directly at the damn screen. It was funny because as I'm getting more into my lives, I remember one of my cousins jumped on. He hit me up later. He was like, yo, you can't be looking all over the place. You got to be looking into the screen. And I wasn't even triggered. I was like, yeah, you were. And I was like nervous. I'm nervous as shit. But I had to build that space out. Being dissociated is the opposite of being present in the moment. When you're present in the moment, you're learning when you're present in the moment, you're learning to detach from. You're learning to be in a state of the detachment, so you can observe. See, when you're stuck and you're not in the present in the moment, it's based on disassociation. That means you're looking at, like, use an example. We talk about building with the aspects of your family. You feel like you're not like your family until you get to a point to where you can see and accept the similarities. Yep. And you see the similarities of how you are like your mother, or how you are like your pops, or how you are like family members, and that actions of avoiding, not dealing with things, loneliness, rejection, whatever wounds may be present. This is the stuff that we work on one-on-one. In that aspect of that space, then you can't become present. Once you become present, detachment is full acceptance of, yep, I got this from my mother. I got these good things. I got these positive things from my mother that serve me. And I got some negative things from my mother that serve me. The biggest thing, you stepping from good or bad, you looking at positive and negative. You got some positive things that don't serve you any purpose. Right now, can none of us go back and say, hey, mom, I need some breast milk? It doesn't make it negative. It doesn't make it negative. It's still positive. It's just not positive for me. That level of nurturing no longer exists for me. I need a different level of nourishment. Now I'm in charge of that nourishment. You feel what I'm saying? Aspects of negatives. Your mom bought everything, bought every Christmas gift and blew out credit cards and blew out shit. And you developed from that in a negative space. It served the purpose because it gave you it gave her the example of the childhood that she never had. Did what I'm saying? But when you looking at your current state, it don't make it positive that you learn how to make more money so you can spend more. No, it's still a negative. It just no longer serves you. You have now evolved past that state. So now I can become present with that emotion. I can become present with that point. I'm now of it, as Unique just pointed out. I'm no longer of it. I'm no longer a part of it. I'm of it. That was a part of me. That was something that I've done. That is something that I now accept. I apologize to myself for thinking I did not know what to apply. I now forgive myself for not applying or now coming into this observation. And now I can thank that space. And now, and this is the key, now I can go through the process of allowing it to separate. Will it hurt? Maybe. Will it be bad? Maybe. Will there be an argument? Maybe. Will there be a fight? Maybe. Got to accept it as it is. Because I must allow this person to express that person, that play. I must allow it to express itself so I can see where I'm at with myself. If I go have an argument, I'm saying, I did all this stuff for you. I still got some work to do. I didn't do that. The moment that I yell out, I did all of this for you, I didn't do all of that for them. I'm trying to give them what I never had in a physical state, not emotional. The only thing when you think about this, when we come into the aspects of reparenting the inner child, emotional development, the inner adolescent, emotional knowledge, the space to evolve, the space to learn those things. They come right. And it's not like they're come, it has to come through. Because you know yourself better than you want to say. When you used to building out things based on a trauma response, that means until you can smooth it over, the only thing you looking at after you smooth it over is you hoping that nothing crack. But when you're in a state of that vulnerability, you understand growth is a necessary part of the process. You looking for the crack. You want the cracks to happen because you know shit's about to grow up out of it. Now I'm looking at what's growing out of it so I can look at it and assess it, prune it back, cut it down, take it away, do whatever I need to do. In that aspect of that space. So now once I come into that state of detachment, detached from everything, I'm of but not a part, I can accept things and have different conversations. I can have the conversation about, well, that's based on this. And this is when you're not using it. This is the aspect of using discernment. This is where that trusting yourself comes in. You having a conversation with someone and then they get upset. You got to first ask yourself, does this person have the capacity? Wait, we came from the same space. And even though we came from the same space, we came from the same damn house, that don't mean anything. Because we came from the same space and this is the things that I did. And since I was out doing this, I wasn't there for what they were doing in that space. I wasn't around them the entire time. I was never in their mind. So instead of me using the dissociative narrative, man, we came from the same space. I don't know how you fucked up your life. Instead of me looking at my sisters and brothers like, yo, I don't understand how y'all got kids. Man, I ain't got no kids. Let me be honest with myself. Most of the earlier parts of my relationships, the women had kids. They all had a son. They all had an inner reflection and example of me, all living out my story. Oh, that's what it was. You motherfuckers living my story. Everyone, like, it wasn't even there. I always say every one of them, and it's like, I'm saying that like it was a lot, but it was like only 3 chicks had kids. And the other 8 relationships that I had, the other 8 total relationships in my career mode, they didn't have kids. They just had dad issues. So like total 11 relationships total ever in my life, whatever. 11, you know what I'm saying? I can count them all. Even getting into the aspects of relationships, I can say that I was exactly what was necessary inside of that. I was everything that was necessary inside of that space. There were everything that was necessary inside of that space. Because if they were not, then that space could not have been created or been absolute. The absolute of that space, it was based on trauma. The absolute of that space was based on this, this, and this. I noticed that when I started working on my types and working on certain issues with myself, even if it at that time was on the surface, that's when we started butting heads. And then it came out as the physical results: money issues, living issues, things of that, the stuff that we get mad at about the human shit that is a result of your spiritual conflict. You got to accept it. I accept all of it. I accept it as it is. Because if I can't accept it, that means something inside. What makes me so I can't accept it? It don't matter how bad some shit is. Acceptance is being able so I can move forward and work with it, work on it. I can actually look at it. I can look at the energetic coding of that, how that was written out, and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Instead of going to go over here and look for something else. Yeah, I ain't got nothing to do with that. My family do this, and this. I would never do none of that. If your whole family a bunch of think about if your family is a whole bunch of, we go to church and we love it. I used to get mad at the woman when it was me who wasn't leading by the example. That's classic. That's the deflection. Deflection. That's when you got to look at that. You got to go back. You got to go back and you got to be like, you know what? Let me go look at where I learned. Let me go look at the first. Let me get to the first examples of that. If I don't remember the first examples of that, maybe it's time for me to get next to somebody that can help me get to those examples. See, the biggest thing about this inside of this space as we're making these moves is we are inside of a space where information that we didn't have, we have access to. It's the way that we implement and we face this information and use this information that's going to be the crucial key. I got to accept it as where I'm at, not where I want to be, not where I once was. Motherfuckers is going all the way back. Yo, I was a king and I was a god. What are you now? What are you now? I am a individual that is riddled in trauma of guilt and shame. So let me work on that first, or all I am is a god of shame, god of guilt. I'm a goddess of hypersexuality. I'm a god of debauchery type shit. Let me accept what I am. That's the whole aspect. Everybody had, and it's the thing. Even when we get to aspects like that, the thing that knocks us out of our boat and puts us into a space is like we're here or we're like, for example, you just saying that aspect. I got narcissistic tendencies towards my child. The key, what you said inside of that space, is you said tendencies. You accept the tendencies. So once you get deep, once you get deeper into that and the aspects of these tendencies, you understand that all a narcissist has the inability to regulate emotions. So then you remove the narcissistic aspect and be like, yo, I have tendencies based on my childhood, based on how I came up, based on how I was raised, where I did not have the ability to regulate my emotions. I was stuck inside of spaces where I was not given a chance to express myself. When I did start expressing myself, since I did not have anybody to teach me the emotional development of expressing myself, when I did express myself, I went into this over exerting myself into that space. And as I overexerted myself, I needed to fill in that space. I needed to fill in that space with something, i.e. kid, i.e. job, i.e. relationship, i.e. this friend, i.e. this group of friends. So I needed to populate that space to keep me separated away from this point. But all of these aspects are elements of that original point. You know what I'm saying? Like going back in aspect, now go back to the aspects and aspects of real estate. Getting that house in order. Accepting where it is at. The biggest thing that hurts a lot of people is that it's not the fear of the aspects of moving forward. It's the fear of no longer existing. What does that version of you look like that's fully healed, been doing the work? What they look like? What they doing? What they doing in their life? What they doing? What they doing? I love myself. I'm in gratitude with myself. I am gratitude. I am love. I am honor. I am respect. I'm no longer using the mantra of I am in gratitude for. I'm gratitude. So everything I do naturally exemplifies and enhances gratitude. Everything. As I said earlier, like 7 years ago, us having this type of conversation, couldn't have it. And if I did have this, here's the key. I noticed when I did have this conversation, it was to get something. Just by reading your comments, Joey, I have this sense in that space. I feel like I will ask you the question, like, do you know what your human design is? That's another major key. These are the things that I specialize in. I specialize in general energy readings, human design breakdowns, natal chart analysis breakdown, Vedic and sidereal, very deep and comprehensive breakdowns, shadow work therapy. It's an actual program. It's actual program we get is therapy. It's therapy on the next. It's therapy that is true. It's therapy without drugs. That's the best way I can explain it. You was not going to leave out the same. But the aspect of understanding things like what's your design? Like there's 5 design types. Manifestor generator. Manifestor generator, manifestor, generator, reflector, projector, reflector. There's 5 types. What type are you? I'm a manifestor generator. Unique and Dawson, they're manifestor generators. I've done their charts. I've done their chart work. They're manifestor generators. Manifestor generators, one of our biggest things that we seem to get frustrated because we do not like to slow down. We have the up-tune ability as being a dual human design type. We like to pull in a bunch of information and then we like to immediately try to build with it. So we'll go from point A to point Z real quick, and then we'll forget to go back to B, C, D. We'll forget to slow down. As opposed to a manifestor, we can have all of these ideas. As a manifestor archetype, you have all of these ideas, but you don't know how to put them together. And then there's the generator archetype. They depend on others. They become dependent on the manifestor to have the idea. You feel what I'm saying? But they're mainly on builders. Then you have the projector type as an aspect. Then you have the projector aspect. The projector is the one that can sit in a room and read a bunch of books, gather a bunch of information, put together a bunch of stuff, but they have a hard time waiting for every time that they go into a space, they can't wait to share. So their biggest thing is waiting to be invited. And in the reflector archetype, they literally reflect everything. They absorb and reflect. So each one of those types, like what is the design type aspect? Then we look at the aspects of how that corresponds with your natal chart in that aspect. How does your design, your human design is the design of how all of this works. Your natal chart, sidereal, natal chart, all of those aspects, life path numbers, those are how your design and these gates and how these 64 codons or these strands of your DNA talk to each other and how you activate inside of the life. So like looking through those types of spaces, you got to be like, you know what? Okay, cool. But yeah. Yep, and lose straight interest. And you be like, then you go, it's not even that you lose interest. It's like once you go back to it, the biggest thing, let me go back because I just read, Dawson said I can't see it. The version of yourself is outside of your need. The version of yourself, the reason that you cannot see it is because you're trying to look at it from the aspect, just like what Joey said, the aspect, you're trying to look at it as a benefit in the now. The version of yourself that you're now coming into the business of becoming is the exact opposite, is the full opposition of who you are now. Mm-hmm. But don't even look at it like that. Like you should be excited being a life path 4 to do the aspects of the work. Because you understand the necessity of the work. You have a choice. You can either not do the work or do the work. You have a choice. Yeah. You still trying to kill the old you, but you ain't got to know the old you yet. You still trying to kill the old you. You ain't got to know him yet. You don't know the old you yet. See, once you get to know the old you, they'll naturally subside. Your old self, they'll naturally bow out when you know yourself. Your old self knows that you are not confident enough to move. So it'll punk you. So you're like you get punked all over your life. That leads into the aspect of, as I pull these cards, first card that I pull off the top is listen. First card I pull off the top is listen. Listen. One of the simplest aspects of listening. When you are thinking, you are listening. When you are thinking, you are listening. Every time you think, you're listening. What are you listening to? If you're always thinking, if you're overthinking, that means you're not listening. You're listening. Are you listening for the answer or are you listening for the truth? That goes into that key with that. Are you listening for the answer or the truth? This goes into aspects of fortitude. Are you listening to that answer? Here's the thing about me when I do energy readings. If anybody doesn't notice, when I do energy readings, I don't need the cards to do the energy readings. I use them to illustrate the points. So I will talk sometimes. If you come to me for a reading, you'll notice that I'll talk ahead of the cards. Are you listening to formulate answers to bring strength to the same old aspects of yourself? Or are you listening to the truth of those aspects and understanding that your strength is going to be in that vulnerability? You have to become vulnerable. You have to become honest in the comprehension of vulnerability and transparency. It's one of the deepest aspects of the healing process. That leads into the aspects of perspective. It's time to acknowledge the aspects of that perspective. That old perspective was based on entitlement, based on, I've done all of this work, so why don't I have any of this? Here's the thing about all the work that you've done. Once you do the work, it's time served. Means you get exactly what the fuck you supposed to get when you do it. Faith without work. I always say this, faith without works is dead. What was your intentions of doing it? Go back to the root, go back to your intention. What intention did you set before you started doing that work? And it matched, was that your true intention? What was that intention based on? That goes into the aspects of your brilliance. See, we always want things to be, ooh, it's so light and so beautiful. Brilliance, that bright, burning brilliance, it's going to burn. It's going to sting. It's going to make you feel it. In order for it to be real, it got to sting. It got to let you feel it first. You got to feel it. And that leads to the aspects of that connection. The brilliance of your connection, that connection into that space, is really accepting how you're connected to it. How are you actually connected to it? How are you actually navigating inside of that space? How are you actually, what is your connection inside of that space? It's time to check. Also, I'm hearing it's time to check the connections inside of your space, because a lot of your connections were based on attachments. Not all attachments are bad, and not all attachments are good. But the attachment that you grew into a certain space, you probably have outgrown. The way that you were attaching to it, or the way that you tried to keep an attachment to it, you've outgrown that. They've outgrown that. The idea is outgrown. Now it's time to revise it. You're in a state of revision. That leads into the aspects of expectation. It's time to remove these. It's time to remove the expectation. It's time to remove the expectation. You're using expectations for how you originally set that space. You're using the expectations from the original contract of that space. Won't work no more. They're not that person. You're not that person. You're still trying to hold them at a certain you're trying to hold them at that space because it validates everything that you've been doing. The hardest thing is to be like, damn it, I have been running. I have been avoiding myself. And I've been trying to put it off, and I've been trying to put it under the guise of I'm doing it for this person, I'm doing it for these people, I'm doing it for this, that, and the third. Don't work no more. Y'all got my whole forehead right here burning right here. That's how hard it is. That shit hitting hard. That goes into the state of understanding discernment. This is going to trigger your discernment, the space of discernment. You have this fear of being judged for what you've done. So you try to validate what you do by, I had to do this, or we wouldn't have did this, or this wouldn't have happened. When in reality, when you started, there was 16, 17 other things that you knew you could have did in that space. There was other things you could have did inside of that space. You knew there were things inside of that space you could have did. There was other choices you could have made, but you made the choice that was best for you. Tumbling down that pedestal that you put yourself on. Those pedestals that you built to put yourself on, to say that you were this best version of yourself, are now coming down. It's not falling apart, it's falling into place. Now it's time to look at, what are you truly pouring into yourself? See, the thing about pouring into yourself, that temperance, pouring into yourself, a lot of times we try to pour to refill. We try to pour to refill. So I'll use an example. You'll sit there inside of that space, and let's say you having that conversation, and now you want to change where you work and how you work. But until you define and this is a major key, until you define the original aspects, that's the thing that you'll realize. That's the thing that you'll realize. You'll be like, I never poured into myself. I've always poured haphazardly. I've always poured just enough. I've always poured just enough. Because if I pour too much, the cracks that are inside of this glass, that's where it's going to pour out through. So I only can pour so much before the cracks start to get bigger. Haphazardly. So now you're inside of that space. Now it's time to take that up. Now it's okay, cool. I need to sit down. I need to stop doing this. I need to stop doing this. I need to stop taking this act with myself of I'm doing just enough and I'm getting by with this, and this. It's time to really assess. It is no coincidence. Remember, there's no coincidence. It's now December 2nd. December 21st is the winter solstice. December 21st, the winter solstice. 21 days. 21 days to break a habit. What have you been avoiding? Not work-wise, not externally. What have you been avoiding with yourself? What space have you been avoiding to deal with yourself? Because that's going to be the key to setting everything else up around you. You can't make others the example of your validation of your old life because you're going to have to keep doing it. We always wonder why I can't leave this, can't leave that. Okay. Going into that space with yourself. But y'all know my motto, if you're not familiar with it. I desire you to be the best. Desire you to be the fucking best. Appreciate you for stopping through. How to get that contract into place. It's time to dissolve that old trust. That old trust of these issues with this relationship and this person. It's time to dissolve these old trusts and establish that you need to do it's time to write out that new, it's time to write it out, do that new writing. It's time to sit in that space and gather those new keys. You've been running, but you got to sit down. I can't make you sit down. Nobody can make you sit down. But I will. And I have created a space for you to come through. But it's up to you to step into that space. With me, GODicalAlchemistLLC.com. The link's in my bio. You can inbox me. Links in my bio. You can inbox me about my services. Inbox me for a little more breakdown. Inbox for the breakdown. And we can build that dialogue up and see where you at and get you where you need to be at. I'm not. I can't be like, hey, you did. I can't come to you and be like, yo, the spirit said, no, we don't do that here. I desire you to be the best once again. I desire you to be the best. You got one or two choices. You actually gonna show up, or you actually gonna show up for yourself, or you gonna keep showing out and then keep complaining that ain't nothing changing. You got to change before anything else changes. Appreciate y'all for stopping through. I'm about to go for my nice little walk. Let's pay this energy off. Anything from readings, any of my services, and y'all came through just in time. Everything from services, setting up sessions, setting up programs, setting up anything. Y'all know where to catch me. My inbox is open 24 hours. I'm not, but the inbox is. That means if you drop something down in you drop something down in my inbox, I will get to you. Understand, I will get to you. I'm going to get to you. Gratitude. All you got to do, hit me in the inbox. If I don't answer it, no, I'm going to answer it. Because this is a big thing that I teach. You got to make time for you. You got to make time for you. You got to make time for you. It's time to make time for you. I love you. Love you. Appreciate y'all running up them likes. Appreciate you. Y'all stay tuned. I'll see y'all again on Sunday. First episode of Papa Sunday Service will be on this channel. Love you too. But I love you. You love us. Ashe.